ставши на коліно, своє полкове знамено, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі, всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі, всю кров
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні. У нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Есть.
The least Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 267 of the news.
And of course, we're going to be reporting the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, starting off on day 267, which is the final week of this week of the war in Ukraine, meaning that tomorrow will be the beginning of an entirely new week. Before we start, though, it appears that there has been a decent amount of controversy about the missile that landed in Poland, and let me go over that for a second real quick, because on top of us getting the news, at least according to the official statements, a little wrong, it seems to be throwing up a lot of contention amongst everyone in the live chat as well. So let's discuss the news, the sequence of events, and some interesting things I've seen. So starting off yesterday at around the midday where I was, 12 o'clock midday pretty much, I was at a birthday party for someone at college, and I got the news that a missile had landed in Poland. At that moment, the missile was assumed to be Russian of origin. It was a Russian-produced missile, and so the going out word at that time was that it was a missile that had flown off course from its target, fired by the Russian Federation, and somehow had skirted its way into Polish territory, killing 2 farmers. That was the story that we had yesterday, and as the stream started to go forward, the story started to become a little more unclear as time kept going. The story went from it's almost certainly a Russian missile, it was Russian designed, to then the story started to become, we don't really know whose missile it was, but we do know that it was Russian designed. Then the numbers started to fluctuate. It was originally 2 missiles, then it turned into 1, and then it turned into 2 again, and then it turned into 1 finally, and it appears that that's the final story that's been stuck with us, that it was a singular missile. Then finally, about 7 hours after our live stream ended, and we, at the end of our stream, we were actually pretty indecisive as to who actually fired off that missile and who and why did it land in Poland. At that point, we're starting to see that a lot of Western officials may start leaning towards the direction that it was a Ukrainian missile that had somehow misfired or missed its target and then glided into Poland and blew up. Others were still saying, and I was still insistent on, it was most likely a Russian missile that had somehow veered off target or had been targeted into the wrong direction due to some kind of misinput to its coordinates, which we also discussed at the end of last night's stream. About 7 hours after the stream, the NATO alliance as a whole came out with an official statement saying that it was a Ukrainian S-300 missile that had missed its target and glided into Poland, landing on the farm and killing the 2 people. And that's the story that's being stuck with right now. Currently, President Zelenskyy is countering that statement and saying that that's not true, it was not a Ukrainian missile, and is demanding some kind of additional proof to back up the claim that it was a Ukrainian missile, and others are going with it and running with it. One interesting thing I saw, however, was that last night, everyone was very much on the same page. It was probably a Russian missile. But as the next 5 hours unfolded, and NATO made an official statement saying that it was actually a Ukrainian S-300 missile that had blown up in Poland, then people wanted to come to my comment section on my video and tell me that I was entirely wrong and irresponsible for making the title the way it was and covering the story the way it was. And all I have to say is this. I am not, and I don't want this to come off rude, don't take it this way, but I'm not apologizing for the title we made last night. We've changed it, yes. Now it says something happened or I don't know. But I'm not apologizing. That story, the way it came out that night, lined up that way. That was the story we ran. We were almost inconclusive near the end. I'm sorry if you didn't like it, but that's life. I can't go back 5 hours in the past after the official statement comes out from NATO and go and change the entire story that was around 5 or 7 hours ago. So if you, for some reason, think I'm like Marty McFly and I'm supposed to have a time machine and go back and fix that stream, there's no way to fix it. That was the story at the time. The story's now changed, but it's still heavily contended amongst a lot of people as to where it really came from. Right now, we've had a poll up since practically the start of the stream. Almost 1,600 of y'all have voted on it as to who y'all believe fired off the missile. And it seems to be kind of a little bit of an even mix. It seems that 43% of y'all say that Russia did it, 32% say Ukraine did it, and another 25% of y'all say that y'all aren't really sure. It seems that on the hardcore statements, about 10%, really 11% of y'all are still leaning towards the direction that Russia did it. 25%, of course, are not making a comment either way, mostly abstaining. And 32% are saying that Ukraine did it. Now, here's a couple of things that we can go over and maybe everyone will see the story. I can't wait. Here's one thing though, I cannot wait for someone to come to this video looking at the title and go, "Oh, how misleading, clickbait," or something like that, because I know someone will have something to say about this one as well. But here's the several avenues that could have happened, because the official story seems to now be completely merged. We don't really know what happened. Either it was a Russian missile, the coordinates were misinput and it flew into Poland and blew up, but because of the implications of a Russian missile landing into Poland, and there may have been, and this is a lot of speculation here, there may have been a phone call in between the United States and the Russian Federation saying that that missile was fired by mistake, it wasn't supposed to land in Poland, and so the NATO investigators were told to make the statement that it was actually a Ukrainian S-300 because, and real quick before everyone goes, no, they would never do that. If they put the blame on Ukraine, nothing's going to happen. The support isn't going to stop coming in. They're not going to be going to war with Russia, and so everything remains status quo. Nothing will change. And that's one of the scenarios that may have happened. I kind of threw that around at about the start of last night's stream, although it wasn't really talked about a lot. But this may be a way to scapegoat the missile and make sure to avoid an escalation to the conflict that could probably never be reversed. The other incident that may have happened is that it was a Ukrainian S-300 that was fired at a Russian cruise missile coming from Belarus or further north in the country, and somehow it missed. And once its solid propellant ran out, and considering that S-300s do not self-destruct, it may have glided all the way into Polish territory and then exploded, and the story we are hearing is correct. We have no idea, and I know that a lot of people are about to be vehement that it's a solid fact that it's one thing or the other. Unfortunately, there's really no way to tell. There's not enough hardcore information. We haven't even gotten a lot of picture or video evidence of the site itself to really see what went on. We haven't seen a lot of it, so I can't really tell you based off picture and video evidence what I'm thinking, and we just don't really know. I'm kind of leaning in the direction that it doesn't really matter. The one thing that is important is that while 2 Polish people were killed, which is quite unfortunate, the conflict is not going to be changing in any way going forward. The Ukrainians are still going to be getting unlimited support from the West. We already see that that's remained a constant, and that's not been brought up into question. And the other thing that we also know is that we're not going to be going to war with Russia. So all in all, it ends up being, just in all honesty, a net neutral. It didn't really result in any major changes of any kind. It was just an incident that occurred, a singular one, that will probably never be repeated again. But with that, that's all I have to say on that one. That's really all the information we have. And so with that, it's now time for us to move on from this little segment about the missile and following up on that. And now it's time for us to move on over into our location unknowns to start off the day with a little bit of a pep in the step. Now, one thing that y'all may or may not know, and I'll tell you all this already tonight, there hasn't been a major amount of news coming from the Ukrainian front lines. Now, there has been a massive amount of activity, specifically in the northeast, north of Donetsk, but we haven't seen a lot of frontline changes as normal. It appears that the front line is solidifying, and my original claim, and of course this was completely thrown off, I forgot, I didn't even know what the Ukrainians were going to be doing last week because they were moving so quickly. Well, actually, it was this week, believe it or not, but the Ukrainians had moved so quickly, I actually dropped the hypothesis that the Ukrainians would use the Dnipro River as a defensive line, but over the past 4 days, after they've taken Kherson, we haven't seen any major frontline changes at all in this area. We have seen that the Ukrainians apparently are still fighting at the Novikhovka Dam and may have even taken it, but beyond that, we're not seeing any major frontline changes down there anymore, and so this frontline may have solidified for the entirety of the war, and the Ukrainians are now going to use the Dnipro River as a strong defensive fortification. It is quite a good one. Barrier-wise, a large moving current of water is usually one of the best barriers you can ever get against an enemy force, and so they might use that. It would be the most logical route, but at the same time, we still do see the occasional raiding party crossing the river or a reservoir to the other side, so it still seems a little contentious. However, if those forces were landing some kind of a bridgehead on the other side for the rest of the Ukrainian forces to move across, we haven't seen that over about 72 or more hours, almost 100 hours. So I don't think that's happening. So I think that those are mostly just raiding parties with an intent to harass the Russians, and the main Ukrainian force has now solidified along the river, and they're moving other forces elsewhere across the front line. And that seems to be the case down there. And since we're already talking about the case down here, instead of talking about the location unknowns, let's talk about Kherson first, starting off in the Novikakhovka Bridge, where we can see that the Ukrainians were able to capture more Russians today. And so, here's the video.
Шкура. Держи. Сейчас пришпырю подожди.
We see the Russians sitting on the deck, or the floor.
Тяни. Тяни. Приходьте ще. Хлопці, приходьте ще. Українську мову, розумієте? Кто откуда? Язык, да. Ты откуда? Ты откуда? Я со Старопольского края. А ты откуда?
We now see him talking to the Russian prisoners. One of them is smoking a cig.
Це де вообще? А тут як оказалося? Тут гуляли чи ні?
Also, I like how they have them in what appears to be a firewood shack. This is just firewood piled up on the other side of the wall. Look at the firewood. Okay, блядь.
А посады, должности? Что?
У нас получается пулеметчик,
Ага.
стрелок.
Угу. Зовут как тебя?
Я,
Не, тебе як звати? Тебе як звати?
меня Руслан,
Тебе?
Алексей.
Тебе?
Also, Matty, have you noticed that they're wearing a red armband?
Yeah, sure are.
You know, I remember another military in history that was very commonly known for wearing red armbands too.
Interesting.
Interesting. I wonder if we spun that armband around a little bit, if we would see a white circle and a blackish cross-shaped object on it. I wonder.
Понятно. Радуйтесь, що не застрелили як других.
Да слава Богу, спасибо, пацаны. Дай Бог вам здоровья.
Yeah.
And with that, that's the end of the video, and we can see this man is chuffing away. If he was a Ukrainian locomotive, this man is working at full speed over here, because he is putting out the exhaust, if you know what I mean. And so with that, it's nice to see the Ukrainians took on 3 more Russian prisoners in the area. We don't know how, we don't know if they were Russians left behind that have been hiding up until this point, or if they were prisoners taken during the push around the Novikakhovka Dam. But one thing is for certain, another 3 Russian prisoners have been captured, and that's another 3 Russians that the Russians cannot count on. With that, we're now going to be moving into the middle of Kherson, where we see that Ukrainian soldiers crowded into a house in Kherson, believe it or not.
Да, відос, пацани.
Ми виконуємо завдання по освобожденню основного села.
Звільненню!
Архангельська, яка село Архангельська.
This is the high-vis reunion.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава! Слава нації! Смерть ворогам! Україна! Понад усе! Україна! Понад усе! Тричі слава! 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 Слава!
Путін хуйло!
Комуняку! Ой, красавці!
And with that, that's the end of the video. But once again, it's pretty nice to see that the Ukrainian forces are in high spirits in the area and making sure to keep up the offensives around there. With that, we're now going to be moving down to the area of Dnipro, where we saw that some Ukrainian artillery, and apparently this was a little while ago, struck the Russians. So let's watch it. According to the video caption, this was during the retreat. We hear some techno remix playing, and once again reminds me of Lego City music. We can now see the Russian vehicles going up in flames, one after the other. All of these hits can be accredited to the 57th Brigade, which conducted all of these artillery strikes, and it looks like they got some pretty good artillerists, as they're almost hitting completely on the mark. We now see another Russian tank burning. And now we can see it having a small burn-off. We can now see the artillery hitting in a tree line again, once again destroying another vehicle as it immediately begins to burn. And we can see one more vehicle over here on the far right getting hit and going up in a little bit of a fireworks show. Once again, we have to thank the Russians for providing us with free fireworks shows. And with that, we haven't seen any more activity in the Kherson area. Of course, it looks like the Ukrainians are now solidifying a largely defensive line along with the Russians on the Dnipro River. With that, we're now going to be moving into our location unknowns, which we actually have a pretty good amount of as well. Starting off with a Humvee on the move. Also, we got to mute the audio, but we can see the Humvee driving down the road. We can now see the Humvee firing off its gun. It looks like this one has a grenade launcher on it. We now see them on the move down the dirt road. We now see them on the move down a fairly muddy dirt road, passing another Humvee. I gotta say, I know that Humvees aren't exactly the most protective vehicle in the world, but they still look incredibly cool. You now see them loading some kind of an ATGM. You now see them ducking down for a second, then running in front of the Humvee. But you now see them firing a ATGM. I think that is... I don't think that's a Stugna. I think that's actually a Kornets. And they're firing at Kornets off of the family SUV. Talk about a soccer mom right there. That's a soccer mom with a punch. Now see them driving through a little bit of a puddle, and with that, that's the end of the video, but once again, pretty nice to see that the Ukrainians are on the move and using their Humvees quite well. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see that a Russian column turned into a little bit of a disaster. Of course, Russian columns are almost always disasters. It would be surprising to think that a Russian construction crew ever built anything right, but in military terms, their columns also turn into disasters as well, as we can see the Russians getting obliterated as they try and move through an open field. Once again, the pitfall of the Russians, an open field. And that's pretty much where they live, is in a giant open field in the middle of Eastern Europe. You see the convoy on the move down here while the mouse cursor is circling?
До басейну.
We can now hear the missile on its way, and it's traveling right towards one of the tanks to turn some Russians into paste. We can see that it turned them into paste, and we can also hear this guy talk so fast that I think he could get into a speed reading competition. Let's hear that one more time.
Guys, fast.
That guy went a million miles an hour. Let's listen to that one more time. We now see one of the tanks fire in panic in the completely wrong direction.
Да. Заткуй назад до джема.
You see them looking through the scope. Still, it appears that the convoy has come to a stop, which is a major mistake. If y'all do not know, when faced with an ambush similar to one of these, you usually want to get through it and keep moving. Instead, the Russians have decided this is the perfect place for a picnic, maybe even a nap, and the Ukrainians are going to make sure to hurry up the nap part of the whole thing. We can hear the next HEGM on its way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, buddy, did you make sure to pick up the potato chips while we were at the gas station?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like he thought he was being mocked, so you'd say it one more time.
Yeah. Hey, did you make sure to grease those wheels before we get that car out of the auto shop?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, now that he's thrown in some copyrighted
switching
music.
it up.
Also, I gotta tell y'all, after hearing this song so many times, which I can't play it on stream, so I don't know if y'all have heard this one a lot, but after hearing this so many freaking times, at the beginning of this sounds like a dog that's just gotten done running across a field, and it's like panting for breath. Let's just listen to that one more time. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like that dog needs some water. I don't know about y'all. We see them looking through the scope again. We can see a Russian on the move out there. He's running around. We can see another tank moving forward. It appears to be firing. This one more towards the rear of the convoy. We can see the front of the convoy over here to the left. See this thing firing again. I'm not really sure if it's a tank or an APC, but we can see a missile on its way to meet it. Oh, hello. Oh, wait a minute. When
Was that
orcs
the
fly.
turret?
No, I think that, well, I can't say that on YouTube, but
Oh.
oh no, it's not. It's a sheet of metal.
Oh.
I
was about to say, there's no way.
Oh my god. But anyways, with that, that's the end of the video, and it's nice to see that the Russians, or the Ruskies as we used to call them, are still not having a good time, and it looks like this ATGM crew was able to take out a fairly good amount of them. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on into the next clip of Location Unknown News, where we can also see a very close call. These Ukrainian soldiers were loading onto one of their vehicles, and actually riding on one of their vehicles, and a round landed incredibly close. In fact, it was a kamikaze drone. So with that, here's the video. Getting past the... Say what?
I said, daggum.
Daggum. I haven't heard anything that loud since NASCAR Talladega race course. But when you see right here, the Ukrainians loaded onto their BMP and are racing down the road. And here in a second, the Russians are about to really get them. We see it going on its way. And it misses. It hit the ground like 10 feet away from the BMP. Oh my lord. Some Wile E. Coyote stuff right here. Also,
Man, what kind of shot is that?
that's the camera from the kamikaze drone.
Well, that's wild.
Yeah. And somehow it landed on the freaking side of the road. So all that happened was that the Ukrainians probably got a little bit of tinnitus on top of the BMP, but beyond that, it was just a little bit of a loud bang and some smoke. The old smoke and mirror shows that the Russians are usually pulling out. And kind of old at this point, to be honest with you. But with that, that's the end of the video, and it's now time for us to move on from that little Looney Tunes bit and on into the next bit of Location Unknown News, where we can see that the Russian prisoner has forgotten his unit. Usually when you get captured, they ask you what unit you're from, what your name is, all that kind of stuff. This guy was asked what his unit was, and he went, I don't know.
Я Климов Владимир Алексеевич.
Должность воинская часть.
Рядовой.
Воинская часть.
Я не помню.
Понятно. Город. Место рождения.
Город Сухой Лог. Место рождения село Знаменск.
And with that, that's the end of the video, and I hate to know that this guy, who kind of looks like a comedian called Tom Segura, unfortunately does not know what unit he's from. Maybe if he focused a little bit more on being, I don't know, a soldier or a conscript or something, or a little bit better to his surroundings, maybe he can make sure to document himself well, but apparently not. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from this little bit of interesting video, and we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of Location Unknown News, where we can see a damaged Max Pro. Now, some people may consider this to be something negative. I always consider seeing a knocked out Max Pro to be a good thing, because you always get to take a good look at the knocked out Max Pros at about how well they functioned. If a Max Pro works according to the way it should and the way it's designed, it should easily be destroyed, but the crew will survive the blast or the impact of whatever hit it. And in this video, we could see that while the Max Pro was severely damaged, as a matter of fact, pretty much knocked out, it appears that the crew compartment was not punctured, and so all of the crew members survived. Apparently that's music, so we're going to have to mute that. But we can see that all of the tires have been blown out. And we can see that some bits of shrapnel did hit the bulletproof glass, also the side of the, I guess you could say, cab, but it appears that the vehicle is entirely intact. Whatever hit the Max Pro did not rupture the inside, and so the crew did survive, which means that this thing did its job. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and it's nice to see that the Max Pro, while it was destroyed, well, it's probably not that destroyed. Honestly, all it needs is some new tires. But, you know, if you drive on Alabama roads, this is kind of a normal sight seeing a car on all four rims because our infrastructure is so bad off in most places. But beyond that, I think it's still mostly operational. It's good to know that the crew did survive. Once again, showing the power of American engineering. With that, we're now going to be moving on from the Max Pro and on into our last bit, where we see that the Ukrainians conducted a little rescue mission. And quite an interesting one, so I'm just going to let y'all see what happened, because the beginning of it is already interesting enough. So with that, here's the video. And again, I mute it because they're playing some kind of Ukrainian anime intro. We can see them dunking this guy down into the well, most likely to steal the lunch money from him. We now see them pulling him back out, and with him comes a little kitten. And they've saved it from an unfortunate fate. I don't know how they found that kid, considering it seemed like it was like 5 or 6 feet deep in that hole, or how they even heard it. But it's good to know they're still doing every little bomb and bit that they can do to make sure to take care of animals wherever they can. And so with that, it's now time for us to move on from our location unknowns and on into the rest of Ukraine, the wide open spaces of the fields and the plains of the northeast around Svatove. And before we get there, I've actually seen that there has been another really interesting poll that around 1,400 of y'all have voted on, and I was wondering, Matthew, what do people have to say on that poll?
All right, so we actually have 2 polls to address, and the first one says, given recent news, do you think the missile that hit Poland came from Ukraine or Russia? It looks like 44% said Russia, 31% said Ukraine, and 25% said not sure. So, Enforcer, what do you think?
Oh, we already covered that one a little bit earlier, and so with that, we're on to the next one.
You already covered it.
Yeah, we covered that like in the first 10-15 minutes of the stream.
Huh. All right. Well, moving on to the next one then. The second one said, Zelenskyy says that he wants to access the missile site. Do you think he is being blocked? 46% said yes, he is being restricted from it. 35% said I'm not sure, and 19% said no, he can demand to inspect it.
I would have to say on this one that he's most likely being restricted from it. Of course, if we go with the idea of the scapegoat story, which is that the missile was Russian and NATO is saying it was a Ukrainian missile because there really is no blame. Who in the world, and think about this, okay, because think about it from a logical standpoint. Yeah, the blame does get put on Ukraine, but what blame? You know, according to this story, the Ukrainians were fighting for their lives, defending their citizens, and unfortunately one of the missiles missed their target and really just glided into Poland by no fault of anyone's. And so it's really a blameless story. And so going off of that, and if that story isn't really backed up by any evidence or fact, and it's just made to make sure that the situation doesn't escalate, they probably will be denying Zelenskyy from the site or any inspectors to take a look at it, because it starts to debunk the story, and it starts to make it to where the West might have to be drawn into the war with Russia because of a missile landing in Poland that could or could not be avoided in terms of its consequences. Really, to be honest with y'all, 2 people dying in Poland, 2 farmers, be that, near a village on the border of Ukraine, dying, is usually not the way a war starts. Things like that are usually overlooked a little bit. I mean, y'all got to remember, this is one very important thing to remember. Was it a Japan Airlines aircraft that flew over the Sakhalin Islands and got shot down in 1987, Matthew?
Who was it again?
Japan Air, Flight 123, I think it was.
I don't think it was a Japanese flight. I think it was heading to somewhere in India, I think.
Let me check real quick. Let's see here. Ah, dang, this is not the one. So let me find the one. Russia, Soviets shoot down airliner. Okay, so it was Korean Airlines Flight 007. Korean Airlines Flight 007 was flying from New York City to Seoul, and it flew accidentally over the Sakhalin Islands. Because of this, Soviet interceptors were scrambled, and it was assumed at the time by the Soviet Union that this was an enemy spy plane that was flying over the Sakhalin Islands. The pilot that flew out there and saw the 747 confirmed that it actually was not a spy plane, but the Soviet government was been determined that it was. It was camouflaged as a civilian airliner from Korea, and so they gave the Soviet interceptor orders to shoot the plane down. They shot it down, killing hundreds. You can see right here that out of everyone, all 269 passengers on board the plane were killed. A decent amount of them were American. And with all this in mind, and considering that this was kind of at the height of the Cold War, 1983 was getting on towards the year of Able Archer. I believe that actually was the year of Able Archer, where tensions were the highest in between the East and the West, and somehow this didn't lead to World War III. And if that didn't lead to World War III, with, I believe, more than a dozen Americans dying on board that 747, along with other Europeans and many other people that were in the Western Sphere, while Korea and Japan aren't a member of NATO, they are within the Western Sphere as a whole, and that didn't lead to World War III. And going off of that, if it was a Russian stray missile that flew into Poland, blew up, and killed 2 people, it's most likely not going to be the thing that NATO goes, oh, it's time to open up the floodgates, let's start World War III today. Because if they didn't start it over something like this, I don't think they're going to be starting it over something that on numbers and scale is a lot smaller. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. That may be the reason why he's being denied, but that's going off of a massive assumption. And once again, we're not entirely sure if it was Ukrainian or Russian. The way that this is kind of an open shut case makes it look like it may have been Russian or it may have been Ukrainian. It was just a simple matter of fact statement. We're not really sure, but I don't think it's going to lead to anything major. And honestly, I think that the entire thing should just be looked over. If they say it's a Ukrainian missile, what's really going to come of it? Nothing's going to come of it. So there's really no reason in trying to investigate it further. Just put it under the rug and keep the thing going. And so with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well. And do we have any others, Matthew?
All right, so that was our last poll. So we are moving on to our super chat questions. And up first, we have a $25 donation from Dieter Herfurt, who is a longtime channel legend, who says, hi, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt. I have no question, but you can answer one from the live chat.
Hey, thank you so much for the support. And first off, keeping this channel running, because without viewer support, this isn't possible. And we will make sure to get a live chat in your honor. Sorry if I'm taking a second over here. I got no spit in my mouth because I drank the coffee and it didn't really do me good at all. And so with that, let's hear a live chat.
All right, so let's see here. The live chat goes to Sittin' and Thankin', who's also a channel legend, by the way, who says, Enforcer, was that river crossing video a raid or an actual river crossing to continue the push toward Crimea?
I believe at this point it was most likely a raid. They were not creating a river crossing or a bridge crossing because those kinds of events occur in split-second amounts of time, literally hours. And prolonging a bridge crossing, sending a party over to create a bridgehead, and then standing by for nearly 4 days means that there isn't one, or that party was destroyed on the other side. It doesn't take that long to set up a crossing, you know, and a crossing over the Dnipro could never be a bridge unless you took weeks to do that anyways, like the Russians did with that pontoon bridge. It would have to pretty much just be a secured foothold on one side of the river, and you start ferrying over more soldiers and more supplies into that foothold, and then begin to expand out from the original landing point, much like a amphibious landing in Sicily or in northern France during the Second World War. And so based off of that, I'm not seeing that that was actually a bridgehead crossing attempt. I believe that was more so of a raid that we were watching on film, much like the rest of the boat party excursions that we've seen so far. They all appear to be more so raid-oriented than actual, I guess you could say, bridgehead creating, to say that in the best way possible, although that was still terrible. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for a really good live chat question, and also thank you so much for supporting us and also helping us to answer a live chat as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $200 super chat, very generous, from Gavin Enright. And Gavin, I have not seen you in the live chat before, so this might be his first time supporting us. And if it is, thank you very much. Gavin says, Commander Enforcer and Vice Commander Enforcer Matt, I wish you all had a good day, but my question for you two is, my Canadian friend, and my Mexican friend are all watching your stream. Can you call the North American Brotherhood? We wish you and the chat a great night, and Slava Ukraine.
And also, thank you so much for the support, Gavin. And I thank you so much for watching this as well. Also, that is really cool to hear that you have both a Canadian and a Mexican friend. That is literally the entirety of the North American Economic Alliance. There's actually a special, I guess you could say, trade organization in between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. If I remember correctly, it has a certain kind of abbreviation to it, if you know the one I'm talking about, Matthew, that I won't say on stream.
It's not NAFTA, but it's the other one. I forgot the name of it.
It's literally, I believe, if I remember correctly, it's the first letter of Canada, the United States, and Mexico put together. And I'm not wanting to say that one on stream because, you know, that's
why is that bad?
Well, it's a joke. You know, like if you have ever seen it, it was a very bad nameage because it immediately became a joke for certain reasons. But anyways, moving on from that is really cool to hear that you have a friend from each country. And nonetheless, and also another thing is that North America is a really interesting place from top to bottom. And while Mexico gets a bad rap, it's a really cool country. Of course, it's having a little bit of a problem with crime, but really, I would compare their problem with crime now to the problems of organized crime that the U.S. had during the era of Prohibition. In a way, it's pretty much the exact same thing that's popped up down there. Instead of it being about booze, though, it's about hard drugs. But still, nonetheless, we're just kind of going through a little bit of a phase. Hopefully, they'll eventually get through it and fix the problem down there. But, you know, every once in a while, these things do flare up. Kind of like Pancho Villa back in the day. But that's a whole other story for another time. Anyways, I thank you so much once again for the support. And the North American Brotherhood is a pretty cool name. I think that would be neat. And maybe we'll use that from here forward. Also, you asked if we're having a pretty good time. We generally are, although I gotta be honest, I am feeling kind of spent today. I don't know if anyone can tell, but I am feeling a little bit tired. And also, I saw Matthew actually hide someone earlier in the live chat, and I thought, you know, I'm usually not one to go back and address this kind of stuff, but they said, I'm expressing my disgust and how immature the enforcer has been acting. I guess it's just my wife and I who has been noticing lately. And to respond to that, the reason why I'm starting to act a little bit more, I guess you say volatile lately, is comments like that. Because one thing that a lot of people don't understand is that I get about 50 comments a day that are just completely derogatory, rude, mean, and I have to read them because I want to go through and read everyone's positive comments, so I have to read those too while everyone's taking a giant crap on me for reporting a story that came out the way it did yesterday, and then 7 hours later the story changes, so then people want to flood my comment section and start calling me an idiot for reporting the story that came out then. So that is why I said I'm not apologizing. And no, I'm not apologizing, and I'm especially not apologizing to folks like you who are going to be that rude and sit there and not understand where I'm coming from when I'm trying to explain it to you. But with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Gavin, and I hope we addressed that comment fairly well. And thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running, because without y'all's support, this is not possible. I say that a lot. I actually have almost started to say that like a broken record too, because without y'all support, we cannot keep the lights on. We can't keep going to college. And so thanks to you, we're able to keep everything running behind the scenes. So that way I can spend 50 to 60 hours on this a week. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope you enjoyed this addressing the comment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $120 super chat from none other than Mark Slava Ukraine, who is undoubtedly a channel legend. He says, I'd like to thank me so much. It's only thanks to people like me we can ... etc. ... Muhaha. NATO said the Polish missile origin is irrelevant. It's Russia's fault.
And thank you so much for the support, Mark. And you almost repeated my whole spiel at the start exactly. So I don't even have to go. Actually, we're going to go through the spiel, but I'm going to add a little bit of a spin to it because I think hopefully you all like it. But also, I would agree with Poland's statement. it doesn't really matter where the missile came from at the end of the day, because by and large, if it did come from Russia, we're not going to start a war with them over something like that. They've already tried to back out and chicken out. They've blinked if it was their missile, so we don't really have to worry about trying to follow through on anything. And also, if it was Ukraine's missile, then it was an unfortunate misfire. Somehow it missed its target, and then just started to glide on into Poland. Things like that happen. You know, in wars, usually being in the border area is quite dangerous. And unfortunately, for the first time ever, we've seen that some of the fire has actually spilled over into Poland, and unfortunately it was from Ukraine. But with that, addressing the first part, now that we've addressed the second part, I have to thank you so much, Mark, for your support. You are truly the best. It's thanks to people like you. Only people like you. They say that you're the greatest person on earth, that this stream is able to keep running. And so thank you so much once again for the 150 Canadian dollars. You send in hundreds and hundreds of dollars to keep this channel running. And I thank you so much once again for the support and helping us to keep alive. And so with that, we are on to the next one, but thank you so much once again, seriously, Mark, for your support. Without you, without a lot of viewers like you, it's not possible for us to keep the thing going. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
All right. And also, I think that was our last one.
Really?
I believe so.
Cool. But anyways, that was our last one. Actually, once Manny said that, I was like, yeah, we've answered 3. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from the location unknowns and on into the Northeastern area. Also, I saw someone put in a straight face. It's not political. Anyways, we're now moving on into the Northeastern area, where we can see that a BMP-3 that largely looked abandoned was then doubled down on and destroyed by the Ukrainians in Luhansk. And so, here's the video. Also, I like the rave music, and we can see the BMP largely abandoned. It looks like even the infantry abandoned their rear compartments. And it looks like now the tank's soul, if it had one, has now left the tank as well, in a little bit of a fiery array. Oh my. And so with that, that's the end of the video, but it's nice to see that that BMP-3 was obliterated, plastered even. Also, real quick, I can see, because I didn't give the disclaimer on this one, that's not political. I've done the impersonation before on stream. It's not political. If you took it that way, I don't know how, but it wasn't. You can see that the BMP was destroyed, which was great. So with that, we're now going to be moving on into the other part of the front line. Well, not really the front line. We're going to be moving behind the lines into the area of Izium, where we can see that a new bridge has been built right beside one of the old destroyed ones. It is usual custom of a retreating army to destroy the bridges behind them. Like the old saying goes, don't burn your bridges. Really in military strategy, if you're retreating, it's the best thing to burn the bridges. But we can see right here that they're passing over with some loud music blaring over the brand new bridge. See them now coming up the other side. And also, I gotta say, what a paving job. Like, look at that paving job. That looks better than most Alabama roads.
Yeah, seriously.
Now, listen, everyone, okay? I'm just gonna say this, because I think this is something everyone can agree on. A lot of the roads in America are complete garbage. Maybe we need to hire Ukrainian road crews to come over here and make them, because that actually looks like a fairly smooth road. And I'm not just, well, let me say this real quick. Let me clarify this. I'm not just saying that the old American roads, the ones that have potholes in them, are pretty rough. I'm saying that some of the new ones are rough. Have y'all ever driven over these new paving jobs these days? Like, they're bumpy, they're lumpy, you know, they got like ruts in them. I mean, I'm talking about when the paving job is done, not when they take off the top layer and then they repave it. When it's done, sometimes it's just poor quality. And also, hopefully we're not having an OBS problem because my little loading thing did it. We're not. Okay, good. But still, I would pay the Ukrainians to come over here and pave up some American roads, because they actually look like they've done a good job over here. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the next clip from the northern area, actually near the front lines, but south of Svatove, where we saw the aftermath of the battle that's occurred at Mikivka. Also, James Bond, you're talking about Canadian roads, and Canadian roads are incredibly bad. If anyone from America thinks your roads are bad, if you go to Canada, they're very bad, but that's usually because of the massive amounts of expansion and contraction that's caused on the roads due to the weather up there. The weather is a lot colder, and so it causes the asphalt to, I guess you could say, expand and shrink at much faster rates, which leads to the roads wearing down a lot quicker, which is a huge problem for Canada. But anyways, here's the video. I'm gonna have to mute it, but we can see them driving along. We see them saying everything is destroyed. We see the Ukrainian telling us that the village is completely destroyed and showing us all the destroyed houses around them. And it does look a scene much like every other area on the front line. Well, these Ukrainian soldiers are stating that the village was actually not destroyed by the Ukrainians destroying the Russian forces here. Apparently, it was destroyed by a decent amount of Russian barrages during their retreat, so that way they didn't leave behind intact buildings. You see a plate carrier left over. You see the ground is just hideous. You can also see this guy with one of those. I mean, I'm not really sure if that is. Nope, that just looks like a normal AK without stock. You see them still wandering around, showing us the destruction. When you see what appears to be an artillerist instead of an SPG, telling us that they pretty much just obliterated the town. The Russians did in their retreat for really no good reason. We can see some Russians involved in napping, and with that, we're going to have to cut the video off right there, because we never want to interrupt the Russians while they're sleeping on company time. That's always something that is always a little bit interesting to see, is that there's always so many Russians asleep, and they just catch them completely off guard. It's just crazy. But with that, we're now going to be moving on to the front line itself, where we see the Ukrainians striking some Russian targets. I just want everyone to know, they were sleeping. Alright, that's the story. So get that inside your noggins, and spread the word. There wasn't nothing else. They were sleeping. So with that, here's the video. We hear the rap music playing again with the bass. No, he's sleeping, everyone. I'm looking at your live chat, so he's sleeping. When you see the artillery hitting vehicles in the tree line and causing some small fires. I don't think the Russians have gotten the memo that it's no burn season. It's quite dry. Of course, it's not dry. The Rasputin's isn't season, but it is a little dry over there. And you can cause wildfires by these campfires that the Russians are burning. I don't know what's in their minds to create these things in this kind of weather. We now see a Russian car driving down the tree line and backing into it. A terrible mistake considering that its friends are burning on the other side of the tree line. We can now see the artillery still hitting the Russians in the tree line. Some of the Russian tanks having some pretty explosive cook-offs. You see this one? This is a really active vehicle over here. It's had like 6 cook-offs over the like course of this film, which is pretty wild to see. But once again, I mean, I can't really blame them. They're chuffing. I haven't seen that much smoke since the last time I was around a chain smoker. And that wasn't that long ago. I think that was like 3 days ago. We see that vehicle once again cooking off. I don't know what was in that thing, but it definitely was taking a long time to burn. And again, that's like the 9th time on film. And so that's the end of the video. But once again, we saw a very explosive Russian tank in that tree line, about as explosive as some people's personalities, which says a lot. Moving on down to the area of Kherson, however, we have seen that the Ukrainians were able to ambush the Russians in this area as well, thanks to the Ukrainian SSO, which is one of their special forces. Also, you can see a very sick M4 right here, which looks nice as hell. And it also looks like they put a camo pattern on it. We see the infrared showing the Russians walking in front of them. You now see them getting ready, and they are lighting up. They are lighting up. Thomas Edison created the light bulb, but these guys invented non-electrical light. And it looks like they lit the Russians up with it.
A few moments later.
Oh wow, they actually included the clip. Gotta mute this here, but we see some Russians taking a little bit of a nap. We can also see an MTLB getting ready to load up the nappers. And with that is the end of the video. And also, look at that, man. They actually animated the outro now. The wolf actually breathes.
You know, I thought I was seeing things for a minute. I wasn't going to say
anything.
anything.
I thought I was seriously just straight up tripping right there. I thought I was seeing movement that wasn't there, but they've actually edited the outro now, which is pretty nice.
No, you weren't tripping.
No, I wasn't tripping, man. I wasn't tripping, B. And so with that, we're not going to be moving on from the area of Kherson. And while we have seen a decent amount of activity in the Northeastern area, it isn't suggesting any kind of frontline changes as of right now. It appears to be the normal activities, pretty much that the Ukrainians enjoy doing, which is wiping out orcs, and then, of course, just letting them clean up the remainder, or just leaving it there. The Russians usually don't clean up their litter. Or their nappers. With that, we're now going to be moving down from the Northeastern area and into the area of Bakhmut and Zolotarivka, where we can see that the Kraken unit also took a crack, I hope y'all get the pun, at the Russians. And so with that, here's the video. That's some rap music, and we can see right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, if they'd stop giving me an epileptic fit, maybe I could count them, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? Yeah, 9, 10, 11. They captured a whole squad. They're all on the floor in this one spot. Gosh, you don't see that often. You usually see like 3 or 4, maybe 8, but 12 is unheard of. That is a huge number to catch in one area. And I gotta say, you gotta give credit to the Ukrainians where it's due. They did a good job right here. And so with that, it's now time for us to move on a little bit further south and into the area of Belorivka, where we saw a destroyed Mista. The Ukrainians misted this thing with artillery fire, and it went from being a Mista to a Mistid. And so with that, here's the video.
Це, блядь, підрастические саушки. Блядь, підари хуярять мінами нахуй. Це ще Іван стоїть, блядь.
Also, real quick, I have seen some people saying that a squad that was actually a platoon. A squad is around the size of 4 to 10 soldiers. So we're gonna let the video continue.
Да, то снаряди возили підара. Це приїхали напередок, блядь, позиції свої, блядь, подивитися. А тут розпіздували їх нормально.
You see them looking into the tree line of the destroyed brush, also by the muddy road.
Ото фаготи лежать. Да, фаготи лежать вони.
Well, you see some
Хуярені.
trash pretty much laid around.
А? Та вони погорівші всі тут. Ось управляємо, кстати, лежать. А? Та їх тут, бач, перемісили, блядь, піздаю.
This tree line looks like what the corner of the street looks like where they've been logging that entire lot, if you know what I'm talking about, Matthew.
Yeah, I think so.
Like the artillery has hit the spot so much it looks like a logging operation. So huge credit to the Ukrainian special logging operation for clearing this tree line. It sounds like now the Russians are getting involved in the logging operation.
Об'єбувати по припадку. Надо в'єбувати поки при пам'яті. Щось вони тут активно хуярять.
Тебе в'їбало чи що? Та, блядь.
And with that, that's the end of the video. And it's pretty nice to see that the Ukrainians were able to create a misted, and also it looks like they were at the receiving end of a Russian barrage as well at the end of that video, and it looks like they made it through okay as far as we could tell. Moving a little bit further on down towards Bakhmut, however, we saw in the area of Soledar some LPR soldiers in action. The old LPR, we haven't seen them in a while. I wonder what they're up to. So let's go back to the beginning. It looks like he's firing off some kind of an RPG. He's now running back through all the garbage behind this pile. He's now firing off his AK into the distance. But we don't hear them getting any return fire. We now see him fire off another rocket launching system. I don't know, an RPG or something. We now see them moving through the tree line, but I didn't see anything. And so with that, and that's the end of the video, and it looks like the LPR is up to their normal of firing at things that aren't there in the Soledar area. At least that's what they're saying it is, but we don't really know where that was. So with that, we're now going to be moving down to the Bakhmut area, where we can also see some Ukrainians taking out Russian forces more closer to the meat of the situation, using a bomblet to make sure that Russians sleep well. Then you see the Russians moving around in their trench, the Ukrainians watching them from above as usual. And now they're dropping the old bomb on them. And boom shakadooey, I don't think they'll be going anywhere. It looks like those Russians won't be doing the ra-da-da-da-da anymore. It looks like they'll be doing the that was terrible.
Oh, wow. That caught me so off guard, too.
Oh, man. That was a terrible sleeping sound, but we can see them double tapping, well, triple, quadruple tapping even, the bunker entrance. They're making sure that the Russians stay sleepy. That one appeared, well, that one actually did go off. It seems to have been delayed, though. And with that, that's the end of the video, and I gotta say that this is pretty nice to see, and I'm glad to know that the Russians were able to get some good sleep. Once again, I hope everyone tells them good night and sleep well, because I think they'll be getting a lot of sleep. With that, we're now going to be moving on into Bakhmut, where we saw some drone action taking place. This was actually filmed a while ago, according to the caption. This was nearly 10 days ago, but this is the first time we've ever seen the video, and so we're showing it today. Of course, copyrighted music playing all throughout, a very nice addition and feature. We can now see the Ukrainian artillery dropping onto the Russian forces. We see more artillery explosions occurring on the tree line. We now see those showing where the Russians are. And a merciless plug, while we watch the the Ukrainian artillery continue to fall onto the Russians and make sure that nap times are instilled across the entirety of the front lines in the Bakhmut area, make sure to hit the subscribe button, because if you enjoy watching clips like these, this news runs every single day of the week, except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, like clockwork. We can see the artillery still hitting the Russians. We can see him hitting him again. And we can see that the Russians are now in a smaller area of the tree line, and they appear to be an endangered species. We can now see the artillery landing again. And can we see it landing even again? No, we won't. But we did see one thing, that the Russians are taking on some pretty decent casualties still. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Bakhmut area, and while we've seen that the front line has not made any shift in this area, that is a good sign. The Russians have been conducting an offensive in this area for about a month at this point, taking on incredibly high casualties and gaining almost no ground whatsoever. And so now we're moving into the Donetsk area, where we can see that some Russian tanks are on the move. These tanks are apparently from the DPR. You see them rolling forward and firing, and it appears that this tank has entered hell. We see it now moving forward. We see them firing into a massive array of smoke. Something that you can't even see through, yet they're going to fire through it. See them firing off the coaxial machine gun, and now turning the turret completely to the front of the tank. Apparently the turret was aimed to the left at the beginning of that film. We can now see them moving through the field, firing off their gun, and also ripping up a decent amount of grass, much like a very inexperienced golfer. We see the tank scouring around, looking into the distance, but it would be a miracle for them to really even see anything to fire at. We can actually see that something just landed right in front of the tank, exploding. We can now see the tank firing into the village again. And that appears to have been a mortar shell. That was incredibly close and almost got the tank. Now see the tank firing again. We see artillery landing in front of the tank. Well, let's see if there's any music playing, or if this is just raw sound. Since it's a Russian film, music's gotta play. So we're now going to mute it again. We can see the tank firing once more into the distance. We really don't know where they're firing or what they even see. We can now see apparently the shell landing. It appears to be a completely abandoned street with destroyed houses all the way down it. Now see an explosion near the tank again. The tank is now backing up. I mean, you see that even on Russian propaganda films, the tanks are almost getting destroyed right off the bat. They're not in any kind of safe position. We can actually see one of them flooring it off the field, apparently because it may have been damaged, perhaps. Now see the autoloader at work again. The tank's still moving through the fields. And considering that this is a 9-minute long video, we're going to be cutting it short here in a few seconds. But this gives you the general idea that the Russians are doing not that well. Of course, oh, wait a minute. Oh, they're not doing well at all. That was actually the tank getting hit directly. Right there. And the camera goes flying. Camera's now on the floor. And the tank is gone. Even on their own films, the tanks don't survive. Oh my!
The camera
Lord.
lived, though.
Camera lived. The tank, not so much. With that, we're now going to be ending the video on a high note, and you can see, even on their own films, they're not doing well. We don't even know what they're firing at. It appears that they're not hitting anything all too well, because it looks like one of the tanks just got destroyed. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of an interesting video from the DPR, and we're now going to be moving down into Donetsk itself, Donetsk proper, where we saw some evacuations underway by the Ukrainian army. But before we move on to this clip, I've seen a couple of interesting polls, and I want to make sure we cover them while they're still in everyone's mind and have a high amount of votes. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we have 2 more polls to address, and the first one says, are the Russians still being pushed out of Kherson at a rapid pace? It looks like 53% said yes, Ukraine is still moving them out fast. 26% said I'm not sure, and 21% said no, Ukraine's momentum has slowed. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that Ukraine's momentum has slowed for a while, but it's only because they're preparing for offensives in the future. You cannot always be conducting offensives. There usually has to be a pause at one point or another, unless you're facing no opposition. So right now, I would say that it does appear to have slowed, at least ever since the liberation of Kherson. But if you throw that in, they're moving at lightning fast paces right now, considering that they took an area the size a little bit larger than the area of Connecticut just about a couple of days ago. And so with that, I hope that answers that poll fairly well, because if we're not including the Kherson push, and we're only talking about the past 3 days, they're not making a lot of momentum. But if you're including Kherson, they are moving incredibly quickly still. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
Right. And the next poll said, do you think that the missile crisis in Poland will likely not result in any consequences? It looks like 80% said likely not, it will fade away. 9% said I'm not sure, and 11% said likely there will be consequences. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that there is most likely not going to be any consequences. We've already seen that both sides, the Russians completely deny responsibility. The West is saying that the missile was Ukrainian, and the West isn't going to do anything against Ukraine, because that would be against a nation that we have interests in. And so, by and large, nothing is going to come out of it. And so with that, I hope I addressed that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our super chats. Up first, we have a $50 donation from BC Skyman, the channel legend. And BC, it's good to see you once again. BC says, my mother used to say, don't let anyone get you down, because you will have a bad day every day. Nobody is perfect on this earth, and so many people whine and cry about nothing. You and Matt are doing an awesome job, and keep it up, and Slav Ukraine.
And
BC, thank you for the kind words too.
And thank you so much for the kind words, BC Skyman. They are words to live by. But one thing I gotta say is that I don't live every day down. I have a lot of fun times and fun days, almost always fun days, but every once in a while there comes something, usually that just beats at me. And like the last night is one of those things, and it's incredibly annoying to deal with, because you sit there and you try and report the news as it's coming out at that moment. If you don't report it, you're going to have tons of people complaining that you didn't report it, and that you're trying to spin some story, and you're not wanting to take care of Polish people, and you hate Poland or something because you didn't include the story. And then when you include the story, all of the information that was available at the time the story was coming out on stream, then a whole bunch of people in the future want to complain that the information wasn't correct, and that I was jeopardizing the entire West by my words and wanting 600 million people to die. Although, if they even watched the show, they would see that's not the case. Stuff like that does annoy me and get me down a pretty good bit, because one thing that I don't think a lot of people get when they're saying these statements is that I spend 50 to 60 hours a week doing this, and then I also work full-time college. So, it's like I almost have no free time. I'm almost always tired. I'm almost always exhausted, and there's almost no time to even do anything simple. And so they sit there and say this crap, and I'm like, man, I'm working nonstop to deliver this news for someone, just sitting at home to see someone go, oh, I'm going to take a big crap on this guy. And it's like, well, I can't tell what's going to be happening 8 hours in the future and adjust my story according to that. So with that, I've honestly got to say, that it is what it is. And if you don't like me whining, I'm sorry. That's what I'm doing right now. And that's one other thing that's also pretty annoying, because I can see one person saying, stop whining. But the thing that annoys me is that you can't ever just have a moment to address it for a second, because, you can just keep on going. But every once in a while, you're like, man, this is just, what people are saying is so illogical, you just want to address it. But anyways, with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, BC Skyman, and thank you so much for helping this channel to keep on running for a good while. You've been here since the very start and helping us to keep going. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And real quick, Cat Nico, I have to agree with you on that one. They said if you address the trolls, more people will troll. And I think that is the case personally. And also real quick, because this wasn't intended to be a very big poll, the question on this one said, should we address the trolls and bots on the live stream? 54% said no and 46% said yes. So I'm kind of shocked about the results. I thought a lot more people would say no. So maybe some folks like hearing us address the bots. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, one thing though, one thing, everyone's always like, don't address trolls, bots. We don't address trolls and bots to sit there and say Russia will win and stuff like that. But I really take it seriously when someone, and sometimes, because sometimes they're not just bots, sometimes they're people who have watched this channel for a little bit and will have seen them, and they'll sit there and say something 8 hours in the future, when the story is completely taken in 180, and they'll sit there and go, your credibility has been damaged. And it's like, have you ever sat there, like this person, and worked 60 hours a week on this stuff, and seen how every once in a while a story can be incorrect and how it's corrected? We went and corrected it tonight because the story was untrue. But one other thing is that when people want to beat down on you like that, you almost don't want to correct it because they're so rude about it. You want to almost double down just to spite them. But, it is what it is. Anyways, with that, thank you so much once again, BC Skyman, and we are on to the next one.
All right, so up next, we have a $20 super chat from Captain Cross 1220, who says, is it possible to nominate by Proctor for a Grammy Award?
Hey, honestly, I would say that's a pretty good move. I would probably nominate it for an Oscar. I think it's a pretty good song. We play it every single night, and so I would say, yeah, I think it could be. I don't know if the Oscar. Oh, wait a minute, is it an Oscar that's for music or a Grammy?
An Oscar's for acting, I think. A Grammy's for music.
Yeah, I think it would be a Grammy. If we do give Grammys to international music, I don't know if Grammys are for international music. I think it may just be American music. If it can, though, that would be pretty cool to give. And so with that, well, thank you so much once again for the support. Pretty cool idea, and I think that they ought to give them a Grammy if possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep running.
All right, so up next, we have a $20 super chat from Panama Floyd, who says another Ukrainian YouTuber is saying that Ukrainian S-300s are still ground to air and they self-destruct if they miss their target, and that is the Russian ones that have been modified to make holes in the ground.
And I thank you so much for the support. And from what we know, S-300s do not self-destruct. We tried to look into that last night, and we got a lot of answers from people in the live chat saying they do not self-destruct. So that may be true, may not be true. Honestly, I would doubt it that a Soviet-era missile or missile system does self-destruct. It appears to kind of be counter-Soviet. Soviets didn't really care about the protection of people on the ground. As long as the system kind of worked, it was good. And so I don't know. I don't really know about that one because we don't really have any clear information. I don't know where that source or information comes from that the missile does self-destruct. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. But then again, I'm not entirely sure. And once again, while I'm kind of a little reluctant to think it was a Ukrainian S-300 that did misfire and miss its target and flew into Poland. At the same time, it could have been. Things like that have happened before in war. Every once in a while, a little bit of friendly fire occurs. You could see that probably in its highest amount of prevalence during the, I guess you could say, fight against ISIS in the Middle East. We actually ended up shelling the Kurds at a point, and the Kurds were on our side. So in a way, it happens every once in a while, and you just gotta say, well, that was unfortunate, regret it, and hopefully try and fix the situation if you can, and then move on. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope we addressed the comment fairly well, and we are on to the last one before we move on into the rest of the news for the night.
Right, and the last one of the second segment goes to Laurie Serene, who puts in a $20 donation. And hopefully, Laurie, I said your last name correctly, and hopefully I didn't butcher it. Laurie says, I read that Russians are hanging animals in the trees and watching them die. Is that true? It seems their cruelty has no balance. And good Lord.
And I thank you for the support, first off, and helping this channel to keep on running so we can answer questions like that. And I have not seen video or picture evidence of that, but I can say that the Russians are incredibly cruel to animals based off of what we saw in the Bucha House Mill European area after its liberation. We actually saw that they would nail dogs' paws to wooden pallets and apparently skin them alive and then eat them. So they're not exactly the most civil of people when it comes to the animals. And so I would say we haven't gotten verifiable evidence of things like that happening, hanging animals in trees and watching them die, but I wouldn't doubt it considered what they've done in the past. And it seems like a lot of people are actually saying that they've seen these pictures. I haven't seen them. But if y'all have, I'll take y'all's word for it, because they've gotten very close to doing that already, and I wouldn't doubt if they did that kind of stuff anyways. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from this question segment, and thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, it's now time for us to move on down into the rest of the Donetsk region, where we can see the evacuations of civilians that are still in the Donetsk area. Ukrainian soldiers have been trying to help them out as much as they can, and some of these people still are reluctant to leave. And so with that, here's the video.
Как обычно, уже стреляют по нам, вот прилетики.
You hear the firefight occurring just a little ways down the
Сейчас
road.
повезем вас в безопасность.
Ножка раз.
Мама,
Добре.
дай ногу.
You can see them helping people get out. Artillery landing right overhead.
Выезжай, обратно.
Обратно.
Нравится?
Да не
Вот в
здорово.
таком сидеть?
Я с нуля-то построил.
Мы все это
И
понимаем.
что вы с нуля-то построили? А семью вы не с нуля строили? Нетесь сюда же.
Ходите так и шапкой, дай, блядь, кусочек хлеба. Нет.
Wait a minute, what?
Так и шапкой, дай, блядь, кусочек хлеба. Нет.
I mean, did that guy refuse to leave because he's like, wait, hang on.
Я с нуля-то построил.
Мы все это
И
понимаем.
что вы с нуля-то построили? А семью вы не с нуля строили? Нетесь сюда же.
Ходите так и шапкой, дай, блядь, кусочек хлеба. Нет.
This man built this house. He's going to die in this house. This man said, I built this thing. Everything around y'all came from nothing. And the Ukrainian soldier was like, so what, man? You're going to die here. And he's like, what? Do you think you're going to take me to a town so I can beg for bread hat in hand? No. He's like, I'm not leaving. I honestly,
You got to respect the dedication, honestly.
I gotta respect it. And, you know, you can easily get where he's coming from. I can, certainly. Because if you built everything from the ground up that you're living in right there, the house and everything, you know, you got so much attached to it. It's your entire life. And you can see why he wouldn't want to leave. And you know, it's still a little foolhardy. He's putting himself in a lot of danger that he could avoid, but you still got to respect him for making that decision and making sure, and ensuring that he will stay with what his legacy and heritage is, which is that house and that plot.
They should at least give the man a rifle.
Так вот проходит эвакуация на Донбассе. Вы сказали, что вы хотите эвакуироваться?
Да.
Можем вас отвезти. Поедем?
Поедем.
Хорошо. Окей, я вывожу своих людей, возвращаю за вами. Нихуя себе!
You hear
Всё в
a
порядке?
shell land nearby.
Слава богу. Пули летают, сука, ну нахуй.
Here's some gunfire. I actually see a firefight occurring right in front of them, so now they've turned around and they're racing down the other direction.
Да, бой уже закончился. Бой точно закончился,
Ну все,
Артем.
тепер точно закончився, надо
Да, да, теперь надо поехать глянуть еще раз.
А куди будуть?
Also, I don't know about you, Matthew, but the baseball cap under the helmet is a little drippy.
That is. Wait a minute. How does that even fit under the helmet, though?
I don't even know, but that was actually really cool.
Надо поехать глянуть еще раз.
I like that.
Is it ingenious or insane? Chat, let us know.
I think it's ingenious, but we'll see what
And
they
it's
think.
pretty ingenious to me.
А куди будуть?
Кировоградская область, если некуда жить. Ой-ой-ой-ой-ой. Ой-ой-ой-ой-ой.
That woman was like, "Where would y'all take me?" And he's like, "Detroit." And she was like, "Oh, no, 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 no." And she's like, "I would rather face artillery fire than Detroit. No, thank you."
Кировоградская область,
And then this guy, and she went, "Oi, oi, oi, oi," and then he started going, "Oi, oi, oi, oi."
если некуда жить. Ой-ой-ой-ой-ой. Ой-ой-ой-ой-ой.
So that's the end of the video, but that's a funny way to end it. And of course, it's a little bit sinister in a way, thinking that she'll probably end up getting shelled and having to stay in the basement of that house for weeks or months on end. But at the same time, it's funny to see that it was entirely dependent on where she would go. She's like, "Where am I going?" And he's like, Kirovograd region. She was like, "Oh, no. No, 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 no." And he's like, "Oh, whatever." And so with that, that's the end of the video, but still, it's nice to see that Ukrainian soldiers are taking their best efforts to make sure to get out citizens that want to leave and go elsewhere to safety. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that clip and on into the next one from the Donetsk area, where you can see some Ukrainian helicopters in flight. Can't play the audio, but we can see them flying over the beautiful fields in their Mi-24s. Those Mi-24s look cool, and also it's fun to fly these helicopters over these fields. And so with that, that's the end of the video, but I gotta say, pretty cool look at some Ukrainian Mi-24s flying over the area of Donetsk. However, we haven't seen any frontline changes in this area. I'm going to summarize this area every day now because it gets old saying the spiel. Business as usual in this area. However, in Volodar, we have seen that the Ukrainians have been holding back a Russian push in this area that occurred about a week and a half ago and has largely died off, but we've seen this BMP-2 firing off its autocannon in the distance to dispel any Russians in the area. It's quite loud. And they're really laying in. Also like the muzzle flash. And with that, that's the end of the video. And also gotta say, right at the end, we heard a nice guttural chord from that engine, which sounded pretty good right here. But with that, once again,
this is like in apartment complexes. There will always be that one Mustang with a straight pipe on it that fires up in the morning. This is that vehicle.
Yeah, and so that's the end of the video. But once again, nice to see that the Ukrainians are still repelling the Russian assault in this area and have not given up an inch. Meanwhile, we can see Ukrainian soldiers in this area also crossing a creek, Ronnie Fitz style. And if y'all know, you know. And so, here's the video. Gonna have to mute it because they're playing some kind of a copyrighted music. And this guy is wearing underwear. This is real Ronnie Fitz stuff right here. He's crossing the creek. It's got to be freezing cold at this time of year. And he's now made it to the other side. He's now making his way up the other side. And we now see another one coming down using the exact same strategy. I guess you could say that these guys don't wear the pants in the relationship. That is all up to the SL to wear the pants. Hey, Matthew, one of them, when they get to the other side, is going to say, I was in the pool! I was in the pool!
Oh, yes, George Costanza.
Yeah. Someone said that this is a standard operating procedure, or SOP. And I would have to say that their legs are quite soppy at this point with that cold river water.
Oh, walking through, what is that, mud?
Yeah, just mud and thickets. Ooh.
I can only imagine what they're stepping in.
Mud.
Yeah, but can you imagine the stuff that's getting on them? Ugh.
I mean, you know, it's probably just, you know, I don't know. I mean, it could be a decent amount of stuff. Might be nothing. Who really knows? I'm not one to say. I'm sure there's a mud expert out there somewhere, so I'm just going to leave it be. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the area of Pavlivka, once again, seeing that the Ukrainians are holding the line quite well, and into the area of Staromayorsk, where we can see some Ukrainian mortars at work. And so let's check this guy out. Nice music. We can see that they still have the cover on the mortar, and they have a nice blue shell. Kind of like a robin egg color. We now see him hanging the round. You now see it firing. And with that, that's the end of the video. But it's nice to see the Ukrainians are keeping the mortar sections at work down there in the southern front. With that, we're now going to be moving to the area of Huilopol, which also rhymes with Kuhuip. And where you can see some Ukrainians hitting, well, some Ukrainians being hit by artillery. I almost misread that caption. These soldiers are about to get a real near miss. So here's the video. You see them moving down the road. You hear the artillery landing right nearby, and these guys have hit the deck immediately. Well, it also sounds like this guy may have actually taken a little bit of an injury. Another soldier's come by to take a look at him.
А где мой? А где мой Ярик?
Here, another round coming in incredibly close.
А, сука! Кобыла! Гондонина.
There are some explosions in the distance. Those don't sound like normal artillery, however. It sounds like return fire. And with that, that's the end of the video. But it is very interesting to see a shell land so close. It seems like the worst that happened is that some Ukrainians, like the one filming, were injured. But beyond that, that was a very close call. If that had hit directly on the Humvee, the situation may have been entirely different. And while we have seen that, and it does appear that the Ukrainians did take some casualties due to injuries, probably, mostly from what we can tell, they're mostly going to just be injuries and that's it. They'll most likely be retired to the rear to receive treatment and maybe even be discharged depending on how severe their injury was. But with that, the southern front appears to be largely stable. The Ukrainians are holding back the majority of the Russian advances in the Volodar and Pavlivka area, and so with that, well, actually, the Ukrainians are holding back the Russians. Hopefully, I said that correctly. In the Volodar and Pavlivka area. And so with that, the southern front is remaining largely stable. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on to the Dnipro area, where we saw some kids singing in a bomb shelter during the missile attacks about a day ago. This video came out today, however. And so with that, here's the video. And so that's the end of the video, but it's always nice to see that the Ukrainians keep the spirits of the kids high, regardless of what's going on. They make a huge effort to, and that's quite commendable to say the least. And so with that, it's now time for us to move on from the Dnipro area and all the way up to Kyiv to listen to the speech from President Zelenskyy. And so without further ado, here is President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on day 267 of the war. Also use me.
Шановні українці, сьогодні був довгий і важкий день. І зараз ввечері вже здається, що події ранку були як мінімум вчора чи позавчора. Саміт в Індонезії взяв участь в сьогоднішній роботі лідерів, потім чергове засідання Ставки Верховного Головнокомандувача, дуже детальне, ситуація на фронті, а також військові представили всі наявні дані про влучання ракети по території Польщі. Усі, хто відповідає за ліквідацію наслідків російських ракетних ударів по Україні, доповіли щодо відновлювальних робіт. Відновлення не зупиняється ані на хвилину. У 18 областях і у Києві продовжуються аварійні та стабілізаційні відключення. Це мільйони споживачів. Робимо все, щоб повернути електрику і генерацію і постачання. Відбулась чергова зустріч оборонного Рамштайну. Ключове питання – посилення нашої протиповітряної і протиракетної оборони. Провів переговори з віце-президенткою Світового банку, яка опікується саме нашим регіоном. Обговорили проекти по відновленню нашої інфраструктури та соціальних об'єктів, роботу фонду відбудови нашої держави. Загальний обсяг проєктів, про які йшлося сьогодні, мільярди доларів, це те, що треба відбудовувати вже зараз, щоб гарантувати нормальне життя людей. Були доповіді щодо звільнення території Херсонщини. Робимо все, щоб якнайшвидше дати людям електрику, воду, зв'язок, фінансові та соціальні послуги, нормальну медицину. В Херсоні нарешті знову відкриваються аптеки. Запрацювала пошта, банки, люди отримують доступ до інтернету. Є вже 30 пунктів роздачі гуманітарної допомоги. Більш ніж 20 деокупованим населеним пунктам Херсонщини повернули електрику. Миколаївщина – те саме. Повертаємо усе, що необхідно для нормального життя. Працюємо, щоб відновити водопостачання Миколаєву. В Снігурівці розпочата виплата пенсій. І я дякую всім, хто забезпечує відновлення, а особливо нашим саперам і рятувальникам. Завдяки їхній роботі можуть працювати безпечно всі інші. Ще раз повторюю, усім на деокупованій території, будь ласка, будьте дуже обережні. Росія хоче вбивати навіть після втечі з нашої землі, тому потрібно бути дуже уважним. Якщо ви побачите будь-який підозрілий предмет, повідомляйте рятувальникам і поліції. Якщо якусь будівлю ще не перевірили сапери, будь ласка, не заходьте туди самостійно. Якщо якусь дорогу ще не перевірили, будь ласка, оминайте її. Доповіді і повідомлення з Донеччини. Без змін, жорсткі бої продовжуються у тих же пунктах, що і раніше. Тримаємо позиції попри десятки атак. Звичайно, було багато міжнародної комунікації. Не про все зараз можна говорити. Захищаємо інтереси України, як завжди. Сьогодні професійний день тисяч наших людей, які виконують одну з найважливіших робіт. І це не тільки робота з інформування людей. День працівників радіо, телебачення і зв'язку. Це про тих, хто зміцнює демократію завжди, хто інтегрує суспільство інформаційно, емоційно та політично, хто об'єднує наші інтереси, наш біль, наші радощі, наші надії та прагнення, наші проблеми. Чим сильніше саме ця сфера в країні, тим сильніше там і демократія. Я щиро вітаю усіх, хто працює в цій сфері, кожного і кожну. Тих, хто робить телемарафон, і тих, хто працює на інших інформаційних майданчиках, і ведучих, і репортерів, і яких ми бачимо і чуємо, і студійних працівників, продюсерів, працівників редакцій, яких суспільство зазвичай не бачить і не чує, але без яких цієї галузі просто не було б. Дякую вам усім за вашу роботу для українців. Сьогодні було доволі тривале інтерв'ю, провів ще оф-рек для журналістів, саме для працівників радіо і телебачення. І день ще не закінчується. Ще засідання Радбезу ООН щодо нової хвилі російського ракетного терору. Слідкуємо за заявами, працюємо з партнерами, захищаємо українські інтереси. Звичайно, одне з головних питань на Радбезі – ситуація в Польщі, з'ясування всіх обставин того, як російська агресія перетнула польський кордон. Українська позиція дуже прозора. Ми прагнемо встановити всі деталі, кожен факт. Саме тому ми потребуємо, щоб наші фахівці долучилися до роботи міжнародного слідства і щоб ми отримали доступ до усіх наявних у партнерів даних і до місця вибуху. Наша вся інформація в повному доступі. Ми даємо її партнерам ще починаючи з ночі, з тих перших годин, коли світ почав з'ясовувати, що сталося. Ще вночі говорив з президентом Дудою, висловив йому свої співчуття. Російська агресія забрала життя 2 громадян Польщі. Я хочу, щоб ми всі зараз разом хвилиною мовчання вшанували пам'ять усіх, чиї життя забрала ця російська війна. Громадян України, громадян Польщі.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 267 of the war. And that, of course, wraps up the Ukraine war news summary for today. Thank you all so much once again for watching. If y'all did enjoy, please make sure to hit the like button and also subscribe, as this stream runs every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays, where we cover the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine in picture and video evidence. Of course, it's been an absolute pleasure to cover the news, and I hope y'all enjoyed it as much as I did as well. And so with that, it's now time for us to move on from the news segment and on into the question segment, where we're going to answer all of the super chats that have been sent in, as well as as many live chats as we possibly can. And so with that, what are our polls real quick, Matthew, to throw everyone a real curveball after I said we get right into the questions?
All right, so we have 2 polls to address during our final question segment, and of course, a big ol' yeehaw! So the first one says, a baseball cap under helmet. Comments. 79% said ingenuity and 21% said insanity. So me personally, I think it's pretty ingenuitive. I would not have thought to put a baseball cap under a helmet, but that's just me. What say you, Enforcer?
I think it looked pretty cool. It's common. Actually been somewhat common for people to put some kind of cap or cover under helmets and wear them, but never a baseball cap, at least not that I've ever seen. And so I'd actually have to say that was pretty cool, and I really liked the look of it. It looked really good. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, and it's time for us to move it to the next one.
All right, and the next poll said, how long do you think reconstruction for Ukraine would last after the war concludes? It looks like 4% said 1 to 2 years, 17% said 3 to 4 years, 24% said 5 to 6 years, and 54% said 7+ years. Now on this one, I would probably say 7+ years, because just real quick, I was looking at just how long, for reference, it took to rebuild New Orleans after Katrina hit, and it looks like it's over 14 years and it's not fully rebuilt yet. I was trying to look for another comparison, like maybe how long it took to rebuild Poland after World War II, but I can't really find a number on that. Maybe the Enforcer can find it.
I would have to try and look, but one thing I can say is that if you'll ever go to South London, you'll see that a lot of South London never actually recovered from the Blitz. South London was hit a lot more than other areas in London. And if we go through here, and I'll try and show this to y'all, and sometimes it's hard to find, but you can find these lots if you look real good. There are places in South London, a lot of green places as well, because during the Blitz, a lot of bombs fell there, and it just ended up that most of it couldn't be rebuilt. So they just tore it down, demolished it, removed the debris, and it just ended up being a giant empty area because there was really no way to rebuild the entire thing. So, in a way, rebuilding will never really end. It will always be an ongoing process. It's especially with the level of damage that we've seen in Ukraine. And, I mean, I'm trying to think about the best way to explain this and use historical instances. In Germany, for example, a decent amount of Germany was not really rebuilt all too well at the end of the Second World War. For example, in Berlin, if I can try and think about some places off the top of my head, and I don't really think they're around anymore. For a long time, it was almost the entirety of the Cold War. Some parts of Berlin still had ruins in them, specifically the eastern side of Berlin, controlled by the Soviets in East Germany. They wanted to punish the Germans the best they could, and so they pretty much just left it being a wasteland, in a way, in some places. But still, in that regard, I would definitely say it would be 7+ years. The Ukrainians will rebuild the best they can, but it still will be a very long and arduous process to do that. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our super chat questions. Up first, we have a $200 donation from none other than Walter A. Lakota Jr., who says, Aloha, Enforcer Matt, and LSA from OG Ellison Bosun.
Yeah,
it's looking
boy.
like Ukrainian military is probably setting up for a offensive this winter when the ground is frozen. This winter is going to be a pound ground for Russia, as they don't have the morale for a long winter, as they are broken.
That is quite true, and I would agree with that. This is one thing that I've been thinking. Let's do a hypothetical scenario, because I don't want to draw it on a Ukrainian line just in case if it's an operational security kind of thing. So, excuse me. Let's draw up a line near Gomel. Let's just say the Ukrainians started an offensive and we're near Gomel for one reason or another. So we're gonna start them off about right here. So yeah, I think, yeah, these seem to be fairly good defensive lines, so do it about here, and then maybe down to here, and then the river. The river would be a dividing line, so 1 second, let me do that properly. So we'll put this as a front line. And this would be what a Ukrainian front line pushing towards Gomel would probably look like, scattered along the major villages, which would become choke points because the Ukrainians would have to take the roads that go through them to be able to supply their military, and also the river provides a natural barrier on their left flank that the Russians would most likely not be able to cross. The Ukrainians could use a small amount of forces to defend, but if they were trying to push towards Gomel, the way we would see the Ukrainians advance in the wintertime, and this is one thing that's important to remember, is that if supplies are low for both sides, the Russians will always have a lower supply amount because they are starting off the winter with poor supply lines. The Ukrainians are starting off with exceptional supply lines, and as the winter goes on, the conditions and the abilities of these supply lines will degrade until the supply lines for the Russians are practically non-existent. The Ukrainian supply lines will be nominal, but they won't be excellent like they were in the summer or the fall. And so what we would be looking at here is that the Ukrainians would be looking at this front line, and they wouldn't want to push directly into Gomel. They would most likely try and push down these two roads, the M10 and the P124, towards Rasvet, and then start pushing up towards Vietka, because that would make a cut on the Russian eastern flank of Gomel that could start to threaten their rearward supply lines if the Ukrainians started to move towards Kumanar. So the Ukrainians would start pushing down these roads, and they could do that with some pretty decent speed. If they start to direct a large amount of artillery fire here, these roads would provide the perfect corridor for the Ukrainians to race down, and we'll draw them, actually we'll just draw kind of like a loop and make it one color as they would be racing towards Rasvet. So let me put this down right here. UA phase 1. And we'll draw this up in a sea blue, I guess, some kind of a blue right there. And so they would be racing towards Rasvet. The Russians would have to counter that. And first off, if both of these prongs started to push out at the same speed, the Russians here in the center would have to withdraw. So now the Ukrainians have a couple of small backup roads that would be made of dirt, but by the winter time, this would have frozen over. It would be solid ground, and so these roads may as well be paved because the permafrost will ensure that they operate much like a paved road. So they'll actually have a couple of backup roads to work off of beyond the M10 and the P124. And once they got to Rasvet, at that point, the Russians would be in complete withdrawal because their supply lines would be threatened, especially these around the eastern sides of the city, and so they would have to withdraw further into Gomel to make sure that they don't get cut off from supply lines that may have been coming from Russia, and they would have to be connected to the ones coming from the west instead, and the Ukrainians at that point would have free reign to push forward, mostly because the Russians have no ability to, I guess you could say, maneuver to counter this Ukrainian push once it broke through towards Rasvet. And so, by that alone, and going off of that particular instance and just trying to explain it in kind of a nutshell of what I would see going on in that area, you could apply that anywhere on the Ukrainian front lines in the winter. If the Ukrainians wanted to move, all they'd have to do is conduct some incredibly precise barrages on a specific part of the line, send in a breakthrough unit to blast through that area, creating an opening in the front lines, and then exploit it, because then that would force the Russians to withdraw, and due to their supply losses and their lack of ability, they wouldn't be able to maneuver fast enough to deal with the Ukrainian breakthrough, and so they could pretty much move through unopposed. So with that in mind, I would entirely have to agree, once the winter arrives, the Russians are certainly going to be suffering, and the Ukrainians will most likely have an upper hand advantage. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support, Walter. You've helped out this channel immensely over the past few months, helping us to keep running, and if it wasn't for viewers like you, it wouldn't be possible. And so thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, real quick to address the poll that was put up about 5 minutes ago, the question is, do you think Ukraine will ever fully recover from this war? It looks like 46% said yes, it will recover fully, 27% said to some extent yes, and 27% also said no, it will have scars of war.
I would have to say on this poll, I would have to say to some extent yes or no, it will have scars of war. Now, this is going to be a very foreign example because it doesn't really apply all too well. But if we look at an area like Palau, and specifically Peleliu down here, you can actually see the scars of war still exist to this day on Peleliu, like right here where these Amtraks were abandoned by the Marine Corps during the Battle of Peleliu, and they're still there to this day. Of course, incredibly different. Peleliu is not Ukraine. Peleliu is an isolated island in the middle of the Pacific, and it probably would have taken way too much effort to really move that stuff out of there or off, and so it just remains where it is. Ukraine, on the other hand, it's pretty easy to move the stuff around, and they also have incentive to do so, but at the same time, I do feel like every once in a while, there will be a tank left behind that just rusts in its spot. There will be also, and I guess you could say, here and there, the destroyed building that may not be demolished or rebuilt. It will just sit there for probably a decade, really doing nothing. It will always have the scars of war. Britain and Germany still have the scars of war. Hell, you can't even tell in some of the major cities like Berlin that they had an old history. Also, Berlin is one of the few areas in Germany where they allowed street view, so you can actually take a look at the city. Like, if you look at this right here, none of this, save maybe one or two buildings, looks like it comes from any time before the 1940s. All of this came around in the 1950s or the 60s because the city had been completely destroyed. And in some places in Ukraine, like for example in Severodonetsk and Lysychansk and Chernihiv, and also Mariupol, certainly, the scars of war will forever remain. It'll either have to be rebuilt from the ground up, or the ruins will remain there until they can be demolished. And so with that, I hope that addresses the poll fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Or do you have any comments to add, Matthew?
No comments to add on that one, so we'll be moving on to our next super chat, which is from Muth Bab, who puts in a $100 donation and says, is Putin still around, and does anybody know? Also, drop the idea of going to law school. You would make a great military intelligence analyst. I am serious, not joking.
And thank you so much for the kind words, Muthfab, and I thank you so much for saying I'd make a pretty good military analyst. I don't know, because there's a lot of experts out there, so, you know, don't really know that for sure. And, you know, I still kind of want to go to law school. I still want to make sure that I become a politician sometime in the future, so that way I can face even more hate, because that would be fun. But anyways, Putin is still around. He's hiding a lot. You don't really see him anymore publicly, but he is still around. He's almost ended up being Hitler in the Führer bunker, and he's just hiding down there, and no one really sees him much. But yes, he is still out there a little bit. But thank you so much once again for the kind words. I would become a military analyst, and actually, the day of the missile attack on Poland, and we thought it was a Russian one before this news was reported, and then everyone knew better than me 7 hours later, and, you know, that was what it was. I was actually telling my mom that if that was the case and the West was going to be going into war, I would probably shut down the channel, and although I have scoliosis, and they've told me that I can't serve in the military, and I'm not even eligible for the selective service if it was possible that a draft was ever called up, I'm not even, I guess you could say, physically eligible to be conscripted through a draft. I said I would probably try and round out the channel and go and join an officer training school and get in the Army, just because that's what you have to do in these kinds of situations. And of course, everyone is going to be saying, oh my god, no, don't do that, war's hell, people die. Yeah, but everyone's got to go over there and do their part. Even if you can't, you've got to try. But anyways, with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. If that missile had been a Russian one, and the West had actually gone in the direction of going into that war, I probably would have started going in that direction if it was possible. They probably would have told me no, and then I would try maybe once or twice more, and then they tell me no again, and then I'd probably give up. But still, thank you so much once again for the kind words, and I really appreciate that people do think highly of the channel. It does mean a lot to me. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support. Now that I've said that for about the 4th time.
All right. And up next, big shout out to channel legend Magic Sky Girl, excuse me, who put in a $50 super chat and threw in a super sticker of the YouTube hippo jumping out of a treasure chest and getting down.
Man, that thing's got Sonic the Hedgehog rings.
It does, like those, yeah.
When it pops out, I can just hear that, you know, those things make whenever they fall out of you. But
yes.
But still, I thank you so much for the support, Magic Sky Girl. And of course, you didn't leave a comment. You didn't leave a comment, dagnabbit. But I thank you so much once again for the support. It helps us to keep alive. And you know that. You've sent in so many super chats. You've heard that spiel before. But I thank you so much once again because it does help us out. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
You know, next we have a $50 super chat from Walter A. Lakota Jr. once again, who says, "It's me again. Fun fact, the Hawaiian alphabet is only 12 letters, making it the smallest alphabet in the world."
Really? Hawaiian? Oh, hey, by the way, everyone, did y'all know this? This is the funniest thing ever. Speaking of, like, the shortest and the longest stuff, the state of Alabama has the pride and joy of having the longest constitution in the world. It beats everyone. It's unbelievable. If y'all actually look at how long the Alabama state constitution is at this point, it's insane. But it's nuts. Anyways, moving on from that, let's check out the Hawaiian alphabet. Hawaiian alphabet. That almost sounded like Korn, you know, the band, or whatever, you know, whoever did that. Anyways, let's take a look at this. Interesting. It uses a Latin alphabet, but it is just so freaking short. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Wow, that's nuts. I don't even... How in the world did they make words with only 12 letters? I mean, I know that there's a way, but how did they come up with a massive vocabulary of words with only 12 letters? Do the words become incredibly long, or do they just somehow find a way to make it work? That is really cool, though. What else can we find about this? Also, have any of y'all seen the Arabic alphabet? Have you, Matthew?
I think so.
This is...
Oh, yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, this is the Arabic alphabet. It's kind of... It's really weird, you know, because it looks like letters, but when you connect them together, I have no idea what any of that means. But it's still pretty interesting, nonetheless. This also looks like the Mojang, the Mahjong logo. Yeah. Just say. Also, another cool one, I think that this one is really neat, is the Welsh alphabet, because watch this, y'all. Prepare to have your mind blown. Boom. The Welsh alphabet. It's almost the same as the English one, except for a couple of differences. But still, alphabets are really cool. And I love languages. Sadly, I never really have the time to learn any of them, although I have tried. But they are all incredibly neat. If I could just do whatever I wanted to, like I'm doing right now, I would probably try and learn a myriad of languages. Most of them would be European, however, because, you know, that would probably be the most beneficial, especially if you're becoming a politician, because imagine how easily you could communicate with foreign nations within our sphere of influence. If you could speak, for example, French, German, and Polish, you could probably communicate with the major key members of the Western Alliance quite well. Of course, you know, you don't have to relearn English to talk to the British or the Canadians. They already speak English, so that's quite an easy one. But still, that is an incredibly cool fact to know about the Hawaiians. And thank you so much once again, Walter, for always coming in here and giving us some really cool facts about Hawaii. Hawaii, the more and more you talk about it, really is an interesting place. And in case you didn't know, Matthew, back in the day, back during, in fact, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii wasn't a state, it was a territory.
I did know that.
Yes. It's a really interesting fact, though, because at that time, Pearl Harbor, one of the most strategically important... Well, actually, it's not that weird, because Guam is now kind of taken over as being the strategically most important island in the Pacific for the United States, and it's also an island that's a territory. Also, wait a minute, hang on, let me look at this. What we got here? Oh, B-1 Lancers. Nice. It's good to know that those are in Guam, at least when this was taken. Some KC-135s. Wow, they actually got quite a little get-together out of here at this airfield. What's at the other airfield, though? Is this just this is the Antonio B. Juan Pat. That's quite a name. International Airport. Well, let's see. They have a... I can't even tell what that one is. I can't even tell what that one is either. It looks like this one isn't even used at all for the military. This is entirely just a commercial airport, but man, this is pretty cool to see. Also, what's out here? They got some hardened shelters for something. And Guam's a neat place. In case you also don't know, there's another fun fact about Guam, because while I don't know a lot about Hawaii, and I'm also leaving that entirely in Walter's wheelhouse, because he shares the coolest facts with us about Hawaii, and I want him to keep doing that, because it's so cool to know. But Guam is actually infested with snakes. It's overrun with snakes. And so they're constantly having to try and kill these things. And one of the ways they do that is filling rats with Tylenol and then dropping them in the woods, because Tylenol is toxic to snakes. And if they ingest it through the rats, they die. So it's kind of a little of an interesting fact. And this entire freaking place is a massive military installation. The whole island. Also, what the hell is going on out here?
Looks like a large baseball field from the shape.
Yeah, it's the high school baseball field moved from our hometown out here to Guam, but still, oh man. I mean, I would really like, of course, it's probably difficult to get to Guam, although it's probably not that difficult. It would be cool to go there eventually. Anyways, with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. And you sent in a fact about Hawaii, yet we got completely sidetracked on Guam. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support and sharing with us another cool fact about Hawaii. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from XX Helldance RX, who says Putin dies and goes to hell. After a few years, he get a day off and went to a bar in Moscow and asked the barkeeper, "Is Kyiv ours?" The barkeeper says, "Ours, P Crimea, B ours, P Donbass, B ours, P great. What do I owe you? B €5."
Oh crap! Oh, that was
what did that mean?
Oh well, that if they're using euros, that means that Russia's collapsed and is now Western aligned.
Oh, okay.
Oh man, that was a pretty good one. Also, I thank you so much once again for the support. That was a pretty interesting joke. You lost me in the middle part. You had us in the half part. I'm not gonna lie. Wait a minute. How does that joke go, Matthew? They had us.
What?
They had us in the first. Oh wait a minute. They had us in the first part. Not gonna lie, but the second part was a great finish. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and also a pretty funny joke. And also, Another thing before we move on and carrying on with some interesting stuff that some people were talking about, because one thing that's funny is that the United States, because everyone's always talking about, the United States came in 1941, so, the war in Europe had kind of already been decided, and the United States were just helping to push the tide, which is kind of true against Germany. However, in the Pacific, the United States carried the entire theater, except for the Chinese, who were kind of doing their own thing, but we'll cover that another time. Anyway, someone said, oh my god, is that Midway? And a lot of people don't know this, but Midway is not that far from Hawaii. In fact, it's pretty much in the same island chain if you look at it from the satellite view. Did you know that, Matthew?
Did not.
Yeah, here's Hawaii. The Battle of Midway happened right here. This is Midway Atoll. Right there.
Oh.
And there's the Midway Air Base. And let's see if they have anything here still. It looks like it's now controlled by the U.S. Marine Corps. And that seaplane hangar actually looks like it suffered a small bit of fire, actually, if we look at it from there. Let's see, what else? Really interesting. It looks like they've also abandoned this airstrip as well. It's just been left to the elements. But man... Also, we can see that this airfield over here, that was once here, is no longer there, much at all anymore. Most likely because the airstrips are not long enough to support any kind of jet aircraft, and this has probably been used to operate Marine Corps Harriers? Maybe some other kind of aircraft? I'm not exactly sure, though. We don't really see anything out here on the tarmac at all. And let's see if we got some pictures of the old hangar here. And... this kid is T-posing, and that's not at all on Midway. I don't even know why this picture's included here. Also, moving on from Midway, because I'm spending too much time on Midway, you can also see some other cool, interesting sites out here in the middle of, I guess I could say, the Pacific. For example, Guam. You can also see Peleliu, where a major battle occurred for the Marine Corps, mostly the Marine Corps. The Army was there as well. Down here, you can actually find Guadalcanal. And I believe, if I'm looking at this correctly, this one right... yeah, this is Guadalcanal. This is the massive... and for some reason, my whole life, I thought that this island was triangular shaped. A very smooth triangle. But it's actually not. It looks something similar to a chicken finger. Which I never knew. I always thought it was a totally different shape. And I also didn't know that it was right near Pavuvu, where the Marine Corps was based at, well, at least the 1st Marine Division was based out of for most of the war, right by Guadalcanal. Anyways, getting way tracked aside in the Pacific Theater. A really interesting conflict, considering that all of everything that occurred in the Pacific Theater was amphibious warfare, from island to island, island hopping as they call it. A very special kind of warfare, and if we ever went to war with anyone in Asia, again, most of it would probably be fought over islands in the middle of the Pacific, or right over Korea and Japan, or right over the Chinese coast. But with that, I hope y'all enjoyed that little. I hope y'all enjoyed that little rabbit hole. Really not attached to anything, but I saw someone talk about the Pacific Theater, and I was like, oh, that'd be cool to go over there and talk about it for a second. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
Right, and up next we have a $20 super chat from Turn Off Your Gaslight, who says, ignore the trolls, keep doing what you do, no apologies. Here is a modest amount of support to the channel, my middle finger to the complainers. Take a chat question, SU.
And thank you so much for the support, Turn Off Your Gaslight. And it's always easy to say to ignore people who dislike you or put up a lot of just, I guess you could say, hate or bad comments. But it does get draining at a time. It gets draining every once in a while, because I'll sit there and I'll not look at it. But then YouTube will tell you and send a notification over my phone saying, you have 99 unread comments. And they harass me until I read them. And so I've got to click on them. I've got to scroll through all of them to just have that notification turn off. And I haven't found any way to turn that off. As far as I know, YouTube will harass me until I read them. So I am scrolling through them, and then I'll see something like, just a rude comment, or someone writes up an entire essay about how they hate this channel or something, and it just is incredibly disheartening sometimes to read, especially considering the amount of time I spent doing this for people to sit there and just take a massive crap on it. And it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, these are just random people who probably have nothing better to live for in their lives, rather than trying to get their rocks off, trying to piss someone off or make them feel down in the dumps. But still, it's just incredibly annoying, and it makes you feel like, man, it's like, and you know, it always kind of sounds stupid whenever I say this, but when you get crapped on like that, especially like today, considering that the story changed and did a 180 in 8 hours, and everyone wants to come back and act like 8 hours ago I should have known what happened 8 hours in the future. It's always disheartening. You're like, man, you know, it's like, you know, I'm sitting here working hard for these people to just complain nonstop. But anyways, I thank you so much once again for support. I try and ignore them the best I can. I hope y'all understand that it's not every once in a while, it's not just the occasional comment. Usually it's dozens of them, and you just sit there and read them. You're like, man, what the hell, you know? But anyways, with that, we're going to get a live chat. So with that, what do we got?
All right, so the live chat question goes to Eugene Minton, who says, "What? Excuse me. What if the missile was actually trying to take out a train or supplies coming into Ukraine to Poland, and not a power plant or power relay line, like most are assuming?"
I would say, real quick, can you reread that one again?
Eugene said, "What if the missile was actually trying to take out a train or supplies coming into Ukraine to Poland, and not a power plant or power relay, like most are assuming?"
Great question. Let's check this area and see if there's any railroad corridors, and there isn't. So if it was trying to hit some kind of supply line, it would have most likely hit further south around here. I think there is a railroad, and there is right here, but there is no railroad from what I can tell where the missile actually landed, which was up in this area. It appears to all be entirely farmland and a couple of small villages, so I don't think it was hitting anything major. If it was, it just fell in one of the most one of the quietest areas of the border. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And also, I saw someone, you know, because I sit there and say America carried the Pacific to the air, so you hit him, Matthew, but it's really offensive because you're assuming other people. Well, yeah, there was, but, you know, here we go with that again. This is almost the same that we went through last night. Listen, I love to know that people have pride in their country, but yeah, look at the Pacific Theater. That's how it happened. Sorry, it's not sorry. Anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
You know, next we have a $10 super chat from Brian Bettinger, who says, "If you don't let Ukraine have their investigation and say in the matter, then it's obvious NATO wants a comfortable way out. It means it's a reverse cover-up."
And I thank you for the support, and that's most likely true. That's most likely the case. And that's something that will probably come out in decades' time. Because things like this are usually, oh crap, it's a big deal. We better, you know, throw this thing under the rug and make sure that people forget about it as quick as possible. So in decades' time, we'll probably figure out, yeah, it was a Russian missile that landed in Poland. But in the event of trying to avoid the conflict, it's also, got you. But it's...
And that was an old message, by the way.
Oh, okay. But it's... I got completely thrown off. Can you reread that again?
If you don't let Ukraine have their investigation and say in the matter, then it's obvious NATO wants a comfortable out. It means it's a reverse cover-up.
And that's true. And they're probably trying to avoid a conflict. We'll probably find out in decades' time that it actually was the case that it was a Russian missile. It may have been. And it was easier to say that the Ukrainians did it because there was no direction it could go. There was no fault landing on anyone. It wouldn't change anything. But you know, you never really know until decades time passes and we see if any declassified documents come out or whether that was actually an accurate statement at the time. And so with that, I hope that answers the comment fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support and sponsoring a live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from White Lightning 777, who says, "The Russians have modified the S-300. Could the Ukrainians have used a captured, adulterated Russian unit, not realizing it was set up for ground targets, with no self-destruct when it missed air targets?"
I would say probably not. The Ukrainians have had a sizable S-300 battery the entirety of the war, and we haven't seen them capture any S-300s. They usually destroy them on the spot if they're Russian-made, so I think that that was a Ukrainian S-300 battery, and if we're going with the official story, it missed its target, and considering that no S-300s, except for the most recent and modified version, which is most likely very few, if not any, of the Ukrainian S-300s, it just veered off, it just missed its target, continued flying, ran out of rocket propellant, and then it just landed in Poland. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. Thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Jose Ruano, who says, "Would you agree that NATO and the U.S. have been covering up and overlooking Russia's abusive and violent behavior, as well as hiding their screw-ups like Benghazi, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc.?
Can you reread that one again? I think I may be misunderstanding it.
Jose said, would you agree that NATO and the U.S. have been covering up and overlooking Russia's abusive and violent behavior, as well as hiding their screw-ups like Benghazi, Iraq, and Afghanistan?
I would actually say that Iraq wasn't that much of a screw-up. We actually ended up achieving our goals, and while it seems that it was long drug out and it didn't really look like we achieved it, we did install a democratic government in Iraq that still exists to this day, well, at least democratic on the surface. You know, I'm sure if you get down under it, it's not really that democratic, but anyways, it still exists to this day. ISIS did pop up afterwards, which made it, at the time, you know, of course, this right here, I will say, has a lot of political, I guess you could say, storytelling in it. But ISIS was the time that we said Iraq was a disaster. It was a waste of time to go over there because it destabilized the entire place. But now that we've quashed ISIS back in 2018, Iraq has largely been stable. They still have suicide bombers and things like that happening all over, but the country at least is intact, and the government is also intact as well. So Iraq actually kind of ended up being a bit of a success in that regard, and it made sure that the oil continued flowing to the United States, because some people sat there and say, it was a war for oil, like it was a negative thing, but that's actually an incredibly high positive. We were ensuring that our resources that we need to continue being a superpower were maintained. Afghanistan, on the other hand, was a complete disaster. We sat over there for 20 years, wasted trillions of dollars, and in the end of it, the government that we had carefully tried to build for 20 years collapsed within a month. That was probably the worst disaster that we've ever pulled off in the 21st century, and so I would say that we've tried to cover that one up quite well, and we've also covered up incredibly well that there was thousands of Americans that were left in Afghanistan after we had officially left and gotten everyone out, and a whole bunch of other people who had supported the United States, we didn't get out either. And there's always a little bit of discussion as to whether they deserve to get out or not. Hey, they supported the United States, and if they were supporting us while we were over there and helping us to keep the whole thing, keep the wheels in our operation turning, then I believe that they're owed a debt of gratitude by the United States by bringing them over here. But moving on from that, Benghazi was a real crap show. That's the only way you can say it. Having the ambassador of the United States beat nearly to death and then dragged through the streets somewhat alive and then killed in the middle of, I guess you could say, a mob, that didn't really end up well. Now that's got a whole bunch of political storytelling to it as well nowadays. So you can't really get into it too much without everyone going, oh, you know, or something, you know, because anyways, that was a disaster. No one can really get past that. It was a terrible occurrence. And we do try, and it's the prerogative of a nation to try and hide its goofs. You know, you don't usually see a country come forward and just pride itself on all of its screw-ups. Like we don't see the Chinese priding themselves on the Great Leap Forward, and if you all know anything about that, you know, if you don't, pull it up. But you don't ever see a country trying to pride itself or make sure that its goofs are clearly visible to everyone. You usually try and hide them the best we can. And I've honestly got to say, though, with the Polish missile incident, we're trying to avoid a war where 600, 800 million people could die. And, you know, in that regard, it's an what would be the best way to say it? It's an admirable goal. It's an admirable cause to try and push this thing under the rug, like we've done many times before, because there will be the time that we do something to the Russians, like sink a boat, and they just have to live with it. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from XX Helldance RX once again, who says, Fella Anonymous sends its regards. First super chat since I watch you in the beginning. Great work. Got no question. Give it to the live chat, and cheers also to PsyOps and the Discord team. Hiram Slava.
Hey, thank you so much for the support. And also thank you for giving a shout out to PsyOps. PsyOps actually became a moderator a little while ago along with Susie Halsey in Iceland. And he's quite a character. He's a really cool guy. He's a very nice guy too. And we felt that all three of them deserve to become moderators, and also PsyOps as well, because PsyOps is just such a funny guy and also an incredibly nice and caring guy, very responsible one. Although he's just like, and you wouldn't think that actually, because he's always cracking jokes. I mean, he just seems like the real jokester, but he's actually an incredibly nice person as well. And I got to give him a huge credit. He's a nice guy all around, and if he's still in here, I hope you heard that. And Also, I thank you so much for enjoying this channel as well, because it does mean a lot to us to get kind words. And I know that every once in a while I harp on the negative words, but the kind words do mean a lot and help to counteract sometimes the negative folks. And so with that, I hope that helps. Well, I just got thrown off because I saw something happen in a live chat. But I thank you so much once again for the support. It helps us to keep this channel running. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from the Final Countdown, who says, I think the Russians attacked extremely west, and the Ukrainians tried to defend themselves the best way they can with Russian-made weapons.
And I thank you for the support, and that was the case. But it still begs the question, although the official statement is that it was a Ukrainian missile, and we're going to be going with that, it still begs the question, was that a Russian missile, and are we trying to cover it up? Because the way the story is made, there's nothing that can come out of it, so it may also be a cover-up. Who knows? We don't really get into conspiracy theories a lot, but that was the case. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Oats Air, who says, take a question from the chat. Slava LSA and Slava Ukraine, Oklahomans are whiny, and Texas supports you.
Thank you so much for the support, and you have been around forever. And so, just thank you so much once again for the support, being so kind to us, and we were going to make sure to get a live chat as well. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
Right, so the live chat question goes to, let's see here, Kelvin Wan, who says, could the high radiation at Chernobyl have prevented Russia attacking from the north?
Actually, they did attack from the north straight through Chernobyl, and they actually ended up with a lot of their soldiers getting radiation sickness and poisoning because they decided the best place to dig fortifications and defensive networks was in the middle of the Red Forest, and so a lot of them ended up getting very high levels of radiation poisoning, and that was not really good for them. So they actually did attack through there. That was actually the road that goes through Chernobyl, which is called the let me check. The P-56. They drove right through it. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a super chat from Lubos Mali, who puts in a $10 donation and says, it still could have been a Russian mess up. If you input Lviv longitude and Kyiv latitude, you get the Polish silo position exact on the spot.
And I thank you so much for the support and also pointing that out. We actually did say that last night on stream as well. And, you know, I've seen a lot of people saying, you know, someone came up with a great theory. We actually were talking about that already last night on stream. I don't know if y'all were around because I said, you know, it was an input of Lviv's coordinates as well as Kyiv's, and it ended up in this area. But it may be the case, we're not entirely sure, but that's about one of the most plausible explanations there are, considering that the coordinates have to be manually inputted. The Russians may have messed up on one of them and input the longitude and latitude for Kyiv and Lviv, and it ended up landing in Poland. If that was the case, and they actually did do that and the West tried to cover it up, you know the Russians must have been sweating bricks, or crapping bricks more like it, in the meantime, until the West said it was, you know, it was a Ukrainian one. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
Next, we have a $10 super chat from Onion Mother, who says, did you say that Alabama had the oldest constitution? I don't believe that is true. I think it might be Massachusetts.
Did I say it was the oldest? Because I think I said it was the longest.
I think you said it was the longest.
Yeah, I didn't say it was the oldest. It's the longest constitution in the world. And if you pull that up, it's actually a fact. So I'll show you. Longest constitution in the world. Hang on. The Constitution of Alabama. Here we go. Let's see here. The Constitution of Alabama. Oh, come on. Longest constitution, longest written constitution in the world.
India.
No, it is India. India is the longest nation's constitution, but dagnabbit. I mean, like, Alabama's is the longest. It's longer than the Indian one. How long is the Alabama Constitution? The Alabama Constitution is 389,000 words, compared to India's 146,385 words. And that is the biggest constitution for a nation in the world. It's unbelievable how astronomically large the Alabama State Constitution is. It's insane, and it's also due to a lot of problems with the Constitution. I believe this one was written in 1911, and we also refer to let's see, how do I say this, because I know that we're about to enter a minefield here. It referred to a certain group of people who were deprived of their, some basic constitutional rights at the time by a certain wordage, and so they pretty much went through, and instead of rewriting the Constitution, they went and made amendments to pretty much correct every single time they were addressed. So it ended up being incredibly long. It's crazy. Also, it's impressive. It's also a little backwards in a way, because why should a constitution be 389,000 words long? Like, how many words are in the New Testament? Just to get an idea of scale. So, the New Testament, the New International Bible is 727,969 words long. The Alabama State Constitution is nearly half the length of the Bible. And that gives you an idea of how insanely large and overcomplicated the Alabama State Constitution is. And funnily enough, we're becoming attorneys in Alabama, so we really have our work cut out for ourselves. Anyways, with that, it's not the oldest at all. Let's actually pull that up. The oldest Constitution, I'm sure it's the English Magna Carta, oldest constitution in the world. The 1780 Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We're not looking for that one. Has the oldest constitution in the world. The Republic of San Marino has the oldest constitution, which came into effect on the 8th of October in 1600. So their constitution is now 422 years old. Dang, that is an old constitution. Also, they're a very small country. San Marino is right here, and most of their country is on a hill. Like the whole thing, pretty much. It's still not as small as Liechtenstein, which only has a population of 30,000 people, the capital being Vaduz, and also the guy who's the prince of Liechtenstein has a net worth of like $2 billion, I think. It's actually an incredibly high amount for such a small country, and their biggest export, if I'm correct, is, I think it's dentures. It's a lot like Luxembourg in that way. Anyways, with that, I hope y'all enjoyed that little rabbit hole and a whole bunch of fun facts, and with that, we are on to the next one, but it's not the oldest, it's the longest.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Richard Daniel Jr., who says, "This is for Enforcer, no question. Haha."
Dang it, Richard. You didn't leave a question. You literally stated you didn't leave a question, but thank you so much once again for the support. And I actually saw you in the live chat saying you did it just to mess with me and pull my chain. So with that, we're putting you up to a firing squad. I'm just kidding. But thank you so much once again, because you've been around forever and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, it's been very fun to talk to you the times I've been in Discord. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
Right, and next up, a big shout out to WL and also BC Skyman for each putting in a $5 donation, but without a comment. But guys, thank you very much for that support, and we do appreciate it very much. Also, we have a $7 super chat from Alan Sanderson, who says, "Please remember, you get 60,000 to 90,000 views on a stream compared to a handful of complaints. Unless we complain or unsubscribe in droves, it's safe to assume you don't need to change anything."
And I thank you so much for the support, and that's kind of true in a way, but at the same time, I gotta say this, because this is something I've realized, and, you always sit there and scoff at companies, because a massive multi-billion-dollar company, sometimes trillion-dollar companies, sit there and they're operating as usual, and then a small group says something, but they're incredibly vocal, and so they result in a massive company-wide change. From here forward, the company will be operating this way, because people send in complaints, and you'll be sitting there and you'll be like, they're like a $500 billion business, and like 5,000 people complain, and they're changing everything. That doesn't make any sense. But when you're on this level, and this isn't as big as Amazon or anything, I'm not saying that, but when you have like 108,000 subscribers, there's only a small portion of them that comment. And so you're trying to gauge what everyone else is thinking off of what these small groups of people who comment are saying. And so when it's all negative, you're like, what the hell? You know, you're like, you know, and especially knowing the amount of work I put into it, it's like, come on, you know, and also the context, because it was funny to me because that night, everyone was, oh, the Russians should pay war, blood, you know, don't even wait for the conclusion and kill them. And then the next day, these same people who said that, you're irresponsible and you've lost credibility, in my opinion. You know, and it's like, come on, you know, it's like no one's going to give you brownie points. All right, you know, you're just sitting here and you're just trying to make yourself feel good. Everyone thought it was a Russian missile the night before. That was the story that had come out for everyone, and then it changed. But anyways, it's I get where you're coming from, and I thank you so much for the support, and I hope I addressed that comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Reflection, who says, if it was a Russian missile, do you think it should be covered up and blamed on Ukraine? Does a cover-up weaken NATO as an organization?
It doesn't really do that all too bad. I would say it doesn't really matter at all, because if it was I guess you'd say a friendly fire incident, then it just is what it is. They happen. You know, the United States has had its own myriad of friendly fire incidents with really everyone we've ever been involved with. So it's not that big of a deal historically, and I guess you could say on the day-to-day, it's not that large. So blaming it on Ukraine isn't a bad thing to do, because it ensures that nothing will change at all. And it was just an instance that will go in the rug. I don't think it makes the NATO alliance weaker at all. I think it shows that they understand the severity of what will happen, and you've got to remember that there's got to be a scale to the response. If that missile had fallen in the middle of Warsaw and killed 20 people, and it was a Russian one, then that would, of course, be cause to respond immediately. However, it hit in the middle of abandoned countryside, practically, in the middle of some small rural villages, near a silo, and killed 2 people. And so it wasn't that big of a deal. Also, you got to remember that we have also let many other much severe things go largely unnoticed, like Flight MH17 over Ukraine in 2014 that got shot down and killed a whole bunch of people, hundreds of them. And so with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another super chat from XX Hill Dance RX, who puts in a $5 donation and says, in memory of Krim, the true fella that passed away after his owners got killed by Russian missile in September, salute to that fella dog.
And thank you so much for the support. And I really feel sorry for all the dogs in Ukraine. I've got to be honest with you all, on my own reasoning, I feel a lot more sorry for the passing and deaths of dogs and other pets than people, because the dogs and of course everyone's going to say human lives are incredibly valuable. Yes, they are, but people are people. Dogs, on the other hand, they have no idea what's going on, and that's what makes them just that much more unfortunate, in my opinion, from the feeling perspective. You know, it's a very illogical way to think about it, but you know, that poor dog doesn't know what's going on, and you know, and it feels, for the most part, that it can trust almost every single person. Some of them can, some of them don't. They only trust the ones that own them. But, you know, when you think about that, you're like, dang, that's just... It's sad to think about dogs getting killed, especially the ones that get killed by the Russians in gruesome ways. Because that dog was probably hungry and was like, oh, look, it's a person, maybe it'll feed me. And then they end up getting skinned alive. And that kind of stuff just is sick. And it abuses the trust that these poor animals put in people in general. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, and a huge shout out to that little pupper as well, because all of them are just sad. It's just sad to think about the situations they find themselves in. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
And up next, we have another super chat from Onion Mother, who puts in a $20 donation and says, you got me. I thought I heard the oldest. Great work, Enforcer.
And thank you so much for the support, Onion Mother, and it's totally fine. I was just making sure, because I gotta say this. I'm going to be honest. That's usually the way people start off with becoming ballistic on this channel, is they'll mishear something. Like, I'll sit there and say, Ukraine is the second largest country in Europe. Oh, no, it's not. And then, you know, and they're going off of the premise that it's the second, I said it's the second largest country in the world or something. And so, I'm sorry if I did sound a little bit like I was rebuffing that quickly there. I was like, oh man, I was like, it's about to be a fight. But I thank you so much for allowing me to correct myself and also understanding, because I said the longest, not the oldest. But thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
Next, we have a $5 super chat from Squamous Tarkus, who says, no matter what you put on the internet, you will get shat on by some rando. You guys are awesome. I wish it didn't get you down.
And I thank you for the support. And another thing that gets me, usually it's the most stupid statements. Like, it's almost, like, honestly, some of them are just straight up slander. And if I could sue some of these people, I would, because what they say is just trying to defame me to other people that may not even know me. Like, people who sit there and go, you just clickbaiting for money. You don't really care about the Ukrainians. You're just siphoning money off the whole thing. It's like, oh, I guess, when I make no money at all on Sunday and I put in 7 hours of work to run a stream, I guess that's me just sucking money out of the whole thing. Stuff like that just really disheartens me and pisses me off, and sometimes makes me feel like I'm doing this for nothing, because, some guy out of the blue can just come out of nowhere, no one knows who he is, and he can just defame you after putting in so much work and so much effort to actually help out, and there's really nothing you can do about it. And that's kind of the reason why it puts me down a little bit. And on top of that, sitting here for a while, I can start to see why the internet kind of needs to have a little bit more accountability for what people say, because sometimes people come on here and they straight up commit libel and slander and defamation, and just in general, against both Matthew and me for no good reason. And if that was normal, if that was in the normal real world off the internet, that's quite serious. But since it's on the internet, people can just do that and get away with it. Anyways, with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Up next, we have a $5 super chat from RH, who says the Goblin Bunker King will give up the ghost before Father Time passes the torch to Baby New Year's. Give my question to someone in the chat.
And thank you so much for the support. I don't really know what that means, but we will give the question to a live chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And the question goes to Montern, who says, didn't the UN vote for Russia to pay reparations, and that EU countries and USA going to use the frozen assets of Russia?
I don't really know about that, unfortunately. I would have to declare ignorance on that one, because I haven't heard anything about it, whether it's true or not. And I also don't know if the UN could do that, because Russia, being on the Security Council, could probably veto that, because the UN has to enforce it somehow, which means that would go to the Security Council, and and they're on the Security Council permanently, and they could veto anything. And so with that, I hope that addresses the question fairly well. And thank you once again for the support, but unfortunately, I don't really know enough about it to answer it all too well. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
Up next, a big shout out to William Stamper for putting in a $5 donation, but without a comment. Also, Roger Corbett for putting in a $3 donation. Thank you both for your support of the channel. We also have a $5 super chat from Ben, who says, your speech just after the news on the first day of Kherson city liberation made me cry. It was just before President Zelensky's speech.
Oh, thank you so much for the support. And I'm actually kind of shocked to hear that it made you cry, because that entire thing was made up on the spot. I was doing that whole thing ad lib, and I thank you so much for enjoying it, because like, unlike Zelensky's speeches that probably have someone writing up the speech every day, because they're way well too put together, and you can tell he's reading, for it to just be ad lib. So if you cry for my speech, I thank you so much, because that was an entirely ad lib speech. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And it's a high honor and praise to hear that my speech touched someone that well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
Up next, we have another super chat from Richard Daniel Jr., who puts in a $10 donation this time. Excuse me. Richard says, yes. Richard says, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, I was just poking fun and having fun. Excuse me, I'm trying to hold in another cough real quick. Pardon me. Goodness. Sorry, Richard, I'm going to start over so I don't butcher your super chat. He says, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, I was just poking and having fun. The entire LSA easily pick out the bots and just ignore them. Keep doing your thing. By the way, Texas and Oklahoma suck. Go Clemson Tigers.
Thank you so much for the support, Richard. And that's fine. I knew you were pulling our chain, and I was just kidding with you. But I thank you so much still once again for supporting this channel and also having a good joke with us here and there. And once again, it is fun to talk to you whenever I'm able to hop in a Discord call. Probably won't be able to do it tonight because I'm tired. I'm tired almost every day, so that's why I usually can't hop in. But I thank you so much once again. And without your support, and without everyone's support, this channel wouldn't be able to keep rolling. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
And up next, we have a $3 super chat from St. John Charger, who says, Przydał is the village in Poland, east on the same latitude, and you'll hit Kyiv. South on the same longitude, and you'll hit Lviv. What are your thoughts?
Pretty good point. Sounds like Matthew is once again dying over there. He's now been poisoned by the Russians and will be falling out of a window soon. But let's take a look at Rizhal real quick since you mentioned it. So here's a mall and also Hotel Rizhal. But what's in this mall? Some really good looking food. Also, is this an old Lamborghini?
It is. It's an old Lambo. Maybe a Gallardo, I think.
That is a pretty nice looking Lambo. It is a little bit square looking though. Also, this is a nice mall all around. Also, I don't know why, but that's kind of creepy. That gives me the creeps. Let's see. We have the normal porcelain figures, some belts, some purses. Oh goodness. KFC. Colonel Sanders.
KFC.
I never thought you would be here. Let's see, what else do we have? It's just a mall, but let's check out the streets of Rizhal again, because we've seen this town before, but I want to take a look at it again in another place. So right now we're over the railroad bridge, and it looks like it. I mean, honestly, rather than the commie blocks, which is normal in post-Soviet countries, or post-PAC countries, it's a nice place. I like it. I think it looks good, and also the street's well paved. And that's interesting to see. And so with that, to answer the question, I think it's plausible that the missile landed in Poland due to a misinput of coordinates, but once again, I'm not entirely sure. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope you enjoyed us addressing that comment fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
Right, and also shout out to Universum for putting in a $2 donation but without a comment, and thank you very much for your support. We also have a $1 super chat from Americano Ranger, who does not leave a comment either, but we do appreciate your support as well. And finally, for our last super chat of the night, we have a $2 donation from Dubsy Dabster, who says whiskey pineapple.
Hey, thank you so much for the support, Dubsy Dabster, and also the whiskey pineapple. I have never...
I was wondering if that was like the phonetic alphabet for like WP, white phosphorus.
I think that may actually be like a drinking thing, you know, like whiskey and pineapple.
I'm joking.
Like I don't drink. I don't think I will drink, but that sounds interesting. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. And we're now about to be moving on into the live chats incredibly early tonight. Actually, way early. Usually this happens about 30 minutes from now. And I don't know about you all, but I find it fun, and we'll be answering questions, of course, but I find it fun to take a look at towns and cities around the world. And so if y'all could, everyone who's here right now, if you would like me to take a look at your town while we're answering questions, just to have a fun time, because this stream will probably go on to about being 3 hours and 15 minutes long, which means we'll probably be here for another 25-30 minutes. If y'all would like to share y'all's hometown, share it. Don't share the street though. Don't get that specific. Just share the town, and I will try and pick some out, and we'll take a look at them. Also, what happened to our live chat?
I put up a Q&A.
Oh, oh, cool. Oh, that's how that works. Because it's a totally different category over here. So with that, make sure to answer it in the Q&A. I'm looking at it. Iraq versus Babylon. So Justin Apps put in
like a battle.
Wyoming, Michigan. Wait a minute, I want to take a look at Wyoming, Michigan. Oh my God, there's actually a Wyoming, Michigan. That is bizarre. That's like saying I live in Florida, Alabama, or something. That's just weird. But let's take a look at it. So let's see here. This is it. So let's take a look at Wyoming, Michigan. Okay, this is a parking lot to what appears to be a church. So let's go up here to the commercial area, near the Applebee's. Honestly, it kind of reminds me of Boiming, and well, it does not remind me of Birmingham now. It reminds me of nowhere really. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. Also, look at the little trail of snow made like through just the snow to the gas station.
That's the trail everyone's father used to take to school and back.
Yeah, and it was uphill both ways. Let's see, Delft. Let's check out Delft. And also, Matthew, can you throw up a question from the live chat?
Like from the Q&A?
We'll just check out some towns for a bit. And then
Or do you just want a question from the general chat?
I was a general chat question. But let's check out Delft.
Oh, okay.
Oh my God! Wait a minute. Before you read that, look at this.
Wow.
That
it looks like what's that place over there in England? Oxford.
England. England is my city. Let's take a look at this municipal building, the Stadius Delft. That is a beautiful building. Man, look at the little canals. Dude, this, oh man, in the Netherlands, this is a cool place. This just looks nice. I like this. But where's the inside? Okay, here's another view. That kind of looks like the Oval Office, doesn't it?
Yeah, a little bit.
Let's see here. Let's a windmill. Windmilling. That's pretty cool. This looks like the cathedral on the other side. Beautiful. Wow, I'm really liking this place. Also, a tree with lanterns in it. Don't know what the lanterns are for. There's probably a history and a tradition to that. Really cool and probably. Man, I'm really loving this town. This is a cool town. Also, it's in traditional Dutch fashion, having the canals pretty much through the entirety of the town. You can see them going everywhere. And also, if y'all don't know, there's the Hague, by the way, or as someone at Matthews University called it, what was it, the Hague or something like that?
Maybe so.
And let's see, moving on up to Amsterdam. The entire city of Amsterdam is so cool. They used canals back in the day before automobiles were a large deal as the roads. And so there's as many canals in Amsterdam as there are roads, at least in the part that used to, I guess you could say, be the town before it started to have its own urban sprawl in a way. And this is the coolest thing ever. Here's Harlem. Like, if y'all have ever wondered where Harlem... Yeah, if y'all have ever wondered where Harlem, New York got its name, it got it from Harlem in the Netherlands, because that is where the Dutch colonized Staten Island. Well, not Staten Island, sorry, Manhattan. Was down here in Harlem. And so that's where it got its name. Isn't that cool?
That's crazy.
And so with that, we're now going to be checking out another town. What's another town? Heidelberg, Germany. German towns, I hate to say it, Heidelberg, Germany is really hard to probably take a look at because it doesn't have Street View most likely, but let's see if it does. Fingers crossed. Oh, it's getting a little bit. Okay, so we're lucky here. It has a little bit of a Street View. Not a good one, though. It's probably just going to be one directional. Yep. I hate that. Oh, man. The joyments. The joyments and the privacy. Let's drop down here and let's see what we got. Oh, wow. Oh, Heidelberg. It's got a nice little look, yeah? This is what I imagine Germany to look like. This is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
Let's see if we can... Well, let's look at the Heidelberg train station. I wonder if they have the ice trains running through it. Let's see here. Oh, and look, they got a little train model thing in the train station. Let's check this out. Okay, that's not noise. That is, I guess you can say your normal commuter. But I'm looking for the voice. Oh yeah, you can see a talent. Nope, that's not a talent. Sorry. It looks like they don't have high-speed service at this train station. Also, Matthew, look at the cool little shunder train. That kind of looks like a tractor. That's cool.
Oh wow, that is cool. I like it.
Germany is. Oh look. It's a vintage. I forgot what this one's called. It's like a V102. But these things were like some of the first diesel engines that the Germans had on their rail lines, which is really cool. I I'm sorry, everyone. I'm kind of geeking out over the railroads. Railroads are kind of my thing. I really love railroads as an infrastructure. I guess you could say choice. Also, where is this? This is in West Germany, so it didn't have any Soviet influence on it.
Do you see that name I put in the chat, in the live chat?
No, because I'm looking at the Q&A segment. But let me go to the live chat. Let's see here. Skalsenberger, Austria. Let's check that one out. So let me copy. And let me voice.
I think it's Saul's Kammergut, by the way.
I have no idea. It looks like an entire area. Maybe. But let's just check out the pictures here. Oh wow!
It's
Now,
that famous town that they have in all like the screensavers and everything.
that is beautiful. I know why they made it a screensaver. Look at that. That looks like Yosemite.
It does, kind of.
Like El Capitan and the Half Dome and all. Man, is
I
that...
don't know what the name is of that exact city, that top picture you looked at. Was there a name on it? Go up to the top.
This one, this is Hallstatt.
Hallstatt. Yeah, that's the city I was really talking about.
Man,
or the town, really.
Let's go check out Hallstatt and see if we got a street view for it. I wonder if Austria has similar privacy laws. So here it is. And where's that choice? It's somewhere around here.
I think rumor had it that Hitler used to go here to vacation.
Really?
I think so.
Well, I mean, like, he didn't... In this instance, he didn't have bad taste. It's a pretty place, but... Man, this place is freaking wild. Of course, the tour bus. Also, that's a long tour bus to be a one-story and not an accordion bus. That's really weird. But I'm liking this place. I'm digging it. It's beautiful. Let's see. So, let me go back to the Q&A. And also, real quick, if y'all were wondering, because I've seen some people in the live chat talking about the railroad thing, me being a railroad geek, I believe that railroads should make a return in the United States. There's a whole bunch of political reasons that are brought up now. I find railroad travel to be quite convenient. And although the United States has moved away from it a very good deal, we used to be the railroad nation. That's how everyone got around, was by the railroad here in America. And we were the forerunners, both in the speed of our trains at the time. Well, the British were well above us in terms of the overall speed. They were known for having some of the fastest in the world, and that was a real good time in British railroad history. But the United States had some of the most luxurious trains in the world, and they were right here in America. I feel like we ought to try and bring that back a little bit. Back in the day, they were run by private companies. Now most of that's spearheaded by Amtrak. And since it is now a national endeavor, why not try and capitalize on that? Since the government has direct control over it, maybe we could try and get some high-speed rail networks on the east and west coast. I don't know if it would cross the interior of the nation. The best that could probably happen is down the Gulf Coast into Texas and maybe through New Mexico and Arizona, although there probably wouldn't be enough population density to support that. Maybe you could still have your old trailblazing like empire builders and such other rail routes that already travel over that area, but just improve the railroad infrastructure and allow them to have priority over the freight trains. But that may be a whole ordeal. You'd have to get into hair splitting on that. But I still think that would be pretty cool. But anyways, let's get back to taking a look at some towns. So, let's see. Someone said Sydney, Ohio. Someone said Vimsi, Estonia. Vimsi, Estonia. I'm interested in that one. So where is this? This is on the northern coast of Estonia, right outside their capital, which is called Tallinn. So let's take a look at this thing. Also, they got a war museum. Cool picture. They got a very raggedy-looking T-34. They also got some artillery pieces. I can't tell what kind those are. I feel like they're 25-pound guns from the British, but I feel like that would be naive to say. Nice armor. That is pretty cool right there. Is that a Finn?
A Finn?
I think it might be a Finn. We can also see a Joyman, and we can also see a Ruski. Let's see. Armored car! Oh my god, it's like a Frycore armored car! That is cool! Look, it's made... Okay, this is cool, Matthew. It's made out of old MG plates that they welded together, and you could see all the armor plating made out of the MG plates.
And was this actually used at some point?
Yes, these were actually used.
In which war?
I believe it was nearer to the end of the First World War or after the First World War for a little bit during the Russian Civil War.
Interesting.
Really cool. They also got a Willys! Oh, that's freaking neat! I think this is a Lend-Lease Willys as well, because you see it has a Russian tag on it, or a Soviet tag, I guess you could say. And there's also blueprints for a Kalashnikov over there. You see the Germans suffering in the winter. They actually have a diorama for that. Nice. Oh, look at the way. Oh, man. Okay, Mosins, well, they've lost my respect. And SVT, that's pretty neat. Some PPSHs. Man, I love museums. A Stug! They got a Stug!
A Stug without the na?
A Sturmgeschütz. But these things are cool. I like the Stugs. What is this? This is from earlier on in their history. Unfortunately, I wouldn't know that era all too well to speak on it. Oh, and in it, oh my god, that is cool. Man, I'm having a field day over here taking a look at this stuff. I know Matthew's probably dying right now. But still, oh man, I would love to go to that museum. We're not even looking at the town anymore. We're just looking at the museum. But man, I'm really liking it. I'm digging this place. I would definitely go here and take a look at it. That is a cool armored car. Man, this is just neat. Museums are cool. I love museums, and I definitely think they're worthwhile. Anyways, let's take a look at the town, and this will be the last one we look at, and then we'll get to answering live chat questions on Ukraine. So, let's take a look here. I don't know why, Matthew, but I feel like these are the apartments that they used in whatchamacallit, Chernobyl, where they said race to power.
Oh.
I feel like
it could be.
Yeah, I feel like these are the apartments, but they keep up the road real good for it to be in a colder area. The road looks like it's practically brand new. And also, they got some really modern buildings around this place too. And some older ones as well, mixed in between. But I like it. I like this place. Anyways, with that, that's the last town we're going to be looking at tonight. But with that, let's get on into the live chats and see what we got.
All right, so up first, we have our decoders of the stream, WF2U, BME, CFA, Mark Hodges, and also Draconiate, who say, Enforcer, the message tonight was, insert Morse code message here, just come up with whatever you want, ...
And you're supposed to come up with whatever you wanted. That's what it meant. I thank y'all for deciphering it, but I was hoping that tonight we would have a whole load of confusion and y'all would come up with different fake messages. But y'all actually just deciphered the plain Jane message. But still, ding, 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 y'all did get it right for that, and y'all do get credit for it. And I thank y'all so much once again for deciphering the Morse code. But sadly, that one didn't go to plan. So with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Mamba Mentality, who says, what do you think would happen if Ukraine was found out to have done it? What's the punishment?
If Ukraine did it, what's the punishment?
Yes.
There's none. Everyone just goes, oh, it's friendly fire. It's okay. We understand. Y'all are fighting a war for survival. Go Ukraine. And then we keep supporting them. That's what happens. And for that reason, I don't know why Zelenskyy is trying to make a big deal about it, because if it's blamed on Ukraine, nothing happens. You know, the West isn't going to react to that in a negative way. We've already seen that the Polish have forgiven them and said, regardless, it's the Russians' fault, because, you know, that wouldn't have landed in our territory if the Ukrainians weren't trying to intercept a missile anyways. So, in that regard, nothing will happen. It doesn't really mean anything. The blame just goes to a country that practically can't be blamed due to the current situation, and everything continues on the way it is. And so with that, I hope that answers that question, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and next up, we have a question from What Else Happened, who says, do we know how many Russian prisoners that Ukraine forces have taken?
We don't. We know that it at least is over 1,000 or maybe 2,000, but beyond that, we have no idea whatsoever, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from Country Strong, who says, why so much identifying yellow on the Ukrainian soldiers? It seems like that yellow, especially on their helmets, stands out so dramatically.
And I agree with you. It does stand out, but the reason why is to prevent friendly fire. Camouflage breaks up someone's silhouette, and also a lot of it looks so similar to each other from a distance that you don't really know who's who. So with that in mind, honestly, got to say, it's really just to prevent friendly fire. And if you're going to start covering up with that much, like the Russians do red and white, the Ukrainians do blue and yellow, like, why not just go back to uniforms from the 19th century? If you're going to be that colorful, camouflage is really losing its effect at that point. You may as well just be wearing some bright colored camo. Speaking of which, were there any yellow uniforms from the 18th century? 18th century. So let's see here. We've got some pictures here of British soldiers, at least in this instance, with yellow facings, but that doesn't really count. We can also see, what country would this be? Damn. French, probably. No, Swedish, actually. The Swedish wore yellow. I thought they wore blue. Hang on. These are Swedes. Man, the Swedes had some drip. I mean, like, that's some pretty good looking uniform right there. Also, let's check out some... Anyways, I would agree. It kind of defeats the purpose of camouflage, and of course it would take a massive change, I guess, to start to implement uniforms like that. But honestly, camouflage has gotten so efficient that we now seen almost a return to form, and they're covering up the camouflage with bright colors to identify who's who. And I think we're going to start going back in that direction where camouflage doesn't have to be great. It actually needs to start identifying the soldiers a little bit better. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from David B. Klauscher, who says, Enforcer, are you ashamed, as I am, to see that so far NATO provided less than 2% of our arsenal while Ukrainians suffer and have a Herculean task ahead, 50 HIMARS and tanks? Now.
And I would actually have to say I'm not that ashamed. I actually think that we've sent a whole load. In fact, we've sent so much that there are still supplies inside of Poland, because while we've only sent them 2%, that 2%, in terms of how large their military is so much that they can't even use all of it, and so we're keeping some of it in Poland for safekeeping. So I actually feel like we've done quite well, as good as we can right now, given the circumstances. And whenever the Ukrainians do lose equipment, because they do lose M777s here and there, we just send another one over from Poland. So I don't really feel that bad about it. I feel like we've done quite well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Mike Gallagher, who says, I think the missile was Russian, and NATO has done a deal. We will let this one slip if you stop hitting the power stations in Ukraine. What do the two of you think?
That may be the case, but it happened too quickly. The Cuban Missile Crisis, which was a similar agreement, it took time, actually. It took a couple of weeks. And this happened over the course of a day. So I don't know if they've really learned how to speed that kind of stuff up. But that may be the case. I'm not entirely sure. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Nick Moore, who says, do you think Ukraine will be the main exporter of scrap metal after the war, i.e. Russian scrap?
Yes, they have loads of it, and they're still finding it in places that they haven't recovered it from. And so I would definitely say they are going to be exporting scrap and also captured vehicles as well, especially to Western countries that are very interested in Russia's best technological capabilities, because it allows us a lot of knowledge that we may have not known otherwise about how far behind the Russians really are. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Sly Walker, who says, do you think the boats crossing to the left bank of the Dnipro River is legit?
Yes, I do. I don't think that they're setting up bridgeheads, however. I think it's just raiding. But I feel like they're legit, and the videos speak for themselves. And so with that, I hope that answers the question. We are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Soulman, who says, do you think Ukraine have too many troops in Kherson? Would they be going east soon as?
I feel like they probably will be moving east, especially since it looks like they're not creating bridgeheads on the other side of the river, like we originally assumed before the Ukrainians proved us wrong on everything else. And then I was like, I don't know what they're doing anymore. Maybe they are crossing the river. But I feel like they will be moving troops east to further help out their lines there and also prepare for other offensives. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Also, George, that is something cool. Cold War reenacting would be neat. It's just that there's not really a lot to reenact. You know, a lot of proxy wars happen, but you know, not much more than that. Vietnam, though, is picking up. People are starting to get into Vietnam era reenacting. The only problem is that reenactors usually like to get period authentic stuff, and that is hard to do with Vietnam, especially because M16s are automatic, and if you want to get one of those, they're quite rare to find, and they're incredibly expensive due to the National Firearms Act of 1985, making it just unbelievably and prohibitively expensive. But still, I think it would be cool to do Cold War reenacting. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Jack, who says, question, how far will a suicide drone fly from this side of the river?
From this, I don't know which side that is, so unfortunately I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one. But they can fly, depending on the type, for dozens of miles, maybe even hundreds of miles. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. And Matthew, I'm going to flip. Someone, Candy Luden said, the Enforcer, check out the Hessian Jaeger uniform. My favorite from history. Jaeger uniform. You know,
wow,
that
that's vibrant.
That's vibrant. You know what else is crazy about it?
You have it.
I have that one. I
thought I recognized it from somewhere.
You won't believe it, Canty Luden, but I actually have done a Jaeger impression in real life. We actually, I believe there was only 3 of us that did it. It was a very small reenactment. So sadly, reenacting is kind of, you know, dwindling down a little bit, but still, we were dressed up just like that. I mean, like, that's crazy that you said that, because I've actually done that, and that is actually my favorite uniform. It's the like, I guess you could say it's the gaudiest in terms of colors. Green and red, you look like you're dressed up for Christmas, but it is one hell of a uniform. That is, it is so freaking cool that you said that, because I actually have it and have worn it before. In fact, Jay Bagwell, who is in our live chat and watches the streams a lot, one of the times he met me, I was actually dressed up in the Jaeger uniform on the 4th of July, which really starts to pinpoint where I was that day. But with that, it was a fun day, and it was also really fun to wear that uniform. But it was hot as hell. It was July 4th, 97 degrees outside, and I was dressed in all wool. You can imagine how terrible that was. Anyways, with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
Right. And also, please forgive me, I think my voice is going just a little bit here. I'm not sure what's got me coughing so badly, but Chip Kerwan puts in a $20 donation once again, and he says, 1 of 4, read all 4. Your work enormously affirms you. LSA members prove it nightly. 278. We all affirm you. Couch potato off troll radar. I trained 100 law clerks, newbie lawyers. You strive for excellence.
And thank you so much for the support, Chip, and also thank you for the kind words as well. And I'm glad that a lot of people on this channel are behind us. It does mean a lot to us, because, you know, there's people out there who don't really like our channel. But thank you so much once again for the kind words. And also, thank you so much for saying we strive for excellence. We try our best, and of course, every once in a while we do miss the mark. But of course, hopefully that doesn't make people just go AWOL like it sometimes does. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
Well, Matthew starts talking like this because he's smoking a whole pack of Newports.
And so with that, we're on to the next one.
I'm hoping it'll go away here in a minute. But Chip Kerwan puts in another $20 super chat and says, 2 of 4, you charge up, super self-illuminate spotlight, preponderantly, you get what you desire, thrill/drive of doing it well, scrutiny hits you with a lot, heat in the kitchen, take heat with mouth filter.
And thank you so much for the support once again, Chip. And we try our best, but you know, and this is something, I don't know, maybe some people face it, maybe some people don't, but when one person criticizes you, you know, like on a normal level, you're like, whatever, you know, screw them, you know, it's just one person. But when you get up to this level, it's just not one person, it's like dozens of people at a time, and it's like, or hundreds at a time, and you're like, dang, it's like, you know, like it starts to wear you down because it's just so many people. But we try and make sure that it doesn't impact us a lot, and that's why we've been able to persevere for 267 days, because the first time we ever really hit a large amount of hate was after the schism, when a whole bunch of the mods wanted to be paid, and I don't know why, because, you know, they weren't even doing anything, but still, I thank you so much once again for the support, and we will try and take the heat. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
Right, and we have another one from Chip Kerwan, who puts in a $10 donation this time, and says, 3/4, what you feel ain't what come out of you mouth. In Spotlight, mouth filter bars all negativity. Honesty is rule number 1, and at the same time, can't admit a weakness equals getting troll distracted. Filter hard to do, start now.
Thank you once again for the support, Chip. We will try, but once again, it is kind of tough to do all the time. And I've seen this, and this is one thing that's made me feel at least a little bit of solace in what I deal with. A decent amount of YouTubers notice this. And while I always encourage viewers, if they know that something is incorrect, to correct me, there are people that are know-it-alls, and they'll just say stuff that doesn't even make any sense just because, you know, they're the smartest thing on earth. And that is sometimes hard to deal with, especially when you get confronted with a load of them. The person I've seen to deal with this the most would actually be a guy called Paul Harrell, who's a gun channel. He's almost always responding to these people because there's just so many of them. But with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to your final section of the 4-part series. And so with that, on to the next one.
And the final one from Chip Kerwan is another $10 donation. He says, 404, before starting job, man said, that'll put some alligator skin on you. Up your learning curve. Keep climbing. Judgment enters, you be affirmed. LSA affirms you massively.
And thank you once again for the support, Chip. And the LSA does affirm me a pretty good deal, but it's always still a little tough to deal with haters every once in a while, just because, like last night, it doesn't make any sense when they come out. And you know, it's always funny to me because I try and deal with it the best way I can, although sometimes it's incredibly aggravating. Then you have someone sit there and say something like earlier on the stream, oh, I've noticed that he's gotten more immature lately. It's like, don't you think that's a little immature to say that? You know, like, I don't get it sometimes. But anyways, with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. We will try. And so with that, we are going to answer one last live chat, and then we're going to be rounding out tonight's stream. And so with that, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that person is DC, who says, whatever happened to those Terminator tanks? Haven't heard about them since the start of the war.
They pop up every once in a while near the front lines, but they rarely ever get used because they're highly rare and also probably fairly expensive. And so they really just roam around back there, but don't really do much. And so with that, I hope we answered that question fairly well. And with that, it's time for us to round out tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here with all of y'all again tonight and covering this night's news. I hope you all enjoyed. And once again, if you did, please make sure to subscribe. We run this stream every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays. And so with that, I thank you all so much once again. And I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the war in Ukraine. Thank you all once again. Have a great night. Take care, stay safe, and Slava Ukraini.
Yes. The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Ще не вмерла України ні слава, ні воля. Ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці. Запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу. що ми браття козацького